Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in these southern United States. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host, Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can give us a phone call. We'll go ahead and open those lines right now. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. Looking forward to a big show today. We're going to be going a little bit long. We're going to be talking about some more Pope stuff in the second half of the program with friend of the show, Connor Lewis, president of the of a labor council in Pennsylvania, also a Catholic. So looking forward to him, to talking to him about the new Pope. In the second half of the program, we are also going to be talking to union members at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau about how that organization, that agency, is being destroyed by the Trump administration and how that's bad for working people. We'll also be talking about the new Postmaster General, who is currently sitting on the board of FedEx.
From the call-in studio
Not
web
a good
interface.
sign for the Postal Service, I don't think. And we're going to be talking about 20,000 layoffs at UPS. But that's all going to be in the second half of the program, folks. We got a lot in the first half of the show, too. Before we get to any of that, I want to make sure that folks know that the Letter Carriers Union's Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive is going on right now. It's always the second Saturday in May. So if you're listening right now and your letter carrier doesn't get to your house first thing in the morning, then go find that yellow Walmart bag that your letter carrier left with you and put some non-perishable food items in it. And then go place that bag of non-perishable food items out at your mailbox, and your letter carrier will take it and they will donate it to a local food pantry. Okay, so right now, stop what you're doing. Go find, it doesn't even have to be the yellow bag that the letter carrier gave you, but it can be any bag. Fill it with non-perishable food items. Go put it out at the road. Every year on the second Saturday in May, the letter carriers, in coordination with the post office and several local food banks and stuff, do their Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. So make sure that you have donated to that. Go ahead and do that right now. And we'll be back, and we'll be right here for you when you get back. We do have a caller on the line. If you want to, if you would like to get where this caller is, you can also give us a call. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That phone number is 844-899-8857. Let's go ahead and bring the caller on the air. Caller, what's your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Doug. I'm from Winchester. I'm a postal carrier or postal custodian.
Yeah, Doug from Winchester.
I've called it before.
Yeah, Doug from Winchester. Appreciate you giving us a call. Good to hear from you. I'm assuming that you have thoughts about the new Postmaster General.
Well, yeah, I was going to talk about that. There was also another information that came out that apparently the post office lost $3.3 billion. And I was wondering if you guys were talking about that as well. It seems like it's a lot of bunch of crap that they're trying to pull to see if they can get rid of us, I guess. So yeah. I think there's a lot of problems with that. Don't like David Steiner. I think that's a horrible conflict of interest. It's probably one of the things that I do agree with Brian Renfro on when he released that statement saying that it is a huge conflict of interest, kind of terrible. They shouldn't have been doing that. They shouldn't do that at all.
Right.
But the $3.3 billion loss, I mean, there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, mainly there's too much management. We need to cut management like crazy. There's a lot of stuff that we could cut that we could easily make that money back. Wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much more thoughts. I don't think than you gave on the lost revenue. You know, I don't. I'm not a businessman. I don't know how to make profits. I don't know how to make those lines go up. But from what I hear from letter carriers who have been calling in about just generally about the state of the Postal Service, the number that I've heard is that something like 15, 20 years ago, the number of managers to carriers was like one manager for every 40 carriers, and now it's 1 to 7. And that just seems like, do you actually need one manager for every 7 carriers? It would seem like no, so I think that there's now, does that get you to $3 billion? I don't know. Also, it is worth noting that even though the post office did lose a few $1 billion in the second quarter, the post office ran a profit in the first quarter of 2025 for the first time in years. And so there must be something kind of going in the right direction, or that was an anomaly. I don't know. What do you make of it? Why do you think that the post office lost so much money in the second quarter, even after the post office posted profits in the first quarter?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of issues, especially with the supervisor thing. I mean, you have like you said, one supervisor per 7 employees. I mean, there's some offices that have 6 supervisors, 4 at night, 2 in the morning, and that not only does that increase the amount of money that they have to pay those supervisors, but it also increases the amount of grievance payouts, because they don't do their job very well, and there's grievances that are handed out in millions and millions of dollars that are thrown at carriers because they don't follow the managers don't follow the contract. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of money in that. I mean, not only do you have that, but we have been so slow in modernizing the post office. I mean, we have LLVs that are ancient, and it takes money to produce new vehicles for the fleet of vehicles, the largest fleet of vehicles. There's infrastructure that they have to put in. They're putting in. I mean, the scanners are not cheap. That infrastructure needs to be put in place. Building new facilities that are falling apart. Those S&DCs, as much as people don't like them, we need to get with the times, and it sucks that they can't build more to accommodate the rural areas, and they're making carriers have to go out of their way to go to these big offices and then drive miles and miles. But I mean, there's a lot to it, and it seems unfair that that's what people look at. They look at that revenue loss and they go, well, we need to get rid of the post office. We need to do something else with the post office. Well, it's a service. No one says anything about the military. Military always loses money, but no one says anything about that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, and that is really a fundamental kind of poison, I think, that that has gotten into the American mind, that like everything has to post a profit. Like there's a societal good that is not measured by, does the post office like post a profit or not. Like that's not, you can't.
It's not the end all be all.
It's not the end all be all at all. And it's total. The post office is a great thing, and yeah, like you said, the military constantly loses money. And here's something else that a lot of people don't realize: the entire government, the whole government, except actually for Social Security and Medicare, will be bankrupt after September 30th. There will be no money for the rest of the government. That's because they only fund the government, 1 year at a time, right? But but actually, and the post office, right? Because the post office doesn't need and doesn't take tax dollars to run most of the time. The post office is by and large self-sufficient. And so yeah, people just don't understand a lot of that. You had there were a couple of acronyms that you mentioned there, that I wanted to make sure the audience understood. LLV stands for light or long life vehicle. That's like the postal trucks. That's the acronym for those. And SMDC is sorting and delivery system, a delivery center, and that's like that's where you consolidate a lot of delivery units and mailboxes and stuff, which makes it a little bit quicker to deliver and stuff like that. So Doug from Winchester, appreciate your call. I think he's already hung up. David Steiner, for those of you who don't know, is a board member on the board of FedEx right now. And so obviously FedEx is a private sector competitor to the post office. And so if this guy is coming from the private sector who is in direct competition with the post office, what is his incentive to make the post office work? Or actually, does he have an incentive to destroy the post office, to rip it up and sell it for parts? I think that is actually what this guy coming from the private sector has. That's the kind of incentive that he has, rather than wanting to make it look good. And look, I don't know. Right now, the Postal Board of Governors, which is who nominates the Postmaster General, has a majority of it is Biden appointees. And so,
but there are several vacancies.
There are lots of vacancies. Yeah, the Postal Board of Governors has 9 total seats, 5 of which are filled. 4 of the 5 are Biden appointees. And so that's weird that the Biden appointees would... so maybe this guy is like a compromise sort of candidate, like he's the best kind of privatizer that they could get. I don't know. I really don't understand it. But the NALC and the APWU both put out very strong statements about it. Brian Renfro said his selection isn't just a conflict of interest, it's an aggressive step toward handing America's mail system over to corporate interests. Private shippers have been waiting to get USPS out of parcel delivery for years. Steiner's selection is an open invitation to do just that. During his tenure as Waste Management's CEO, Steiner took a stand against unions. He built his brand on union busting, slashing jobs, and replacing workers with machines. He has publicly bragged about shrinking the union footprint. Now he's being handed the keys to one of the nation's largest unionized employers. At a time when collaboration with workers helped USPS turn a $144 million profit in the last quarter of 2024, this decision flies in the face of everything that's working. This isn't just bad policy, it's a direct assault on the workers who keep the mail moving and the public connected. So, not good signs, I don't think. I'm just really, really concerned about it. The American Postal Workers Union also put out a statement. The APWU, the American Postal Workers Union, so there are 4 different mail unions. The National Association of Letter Carriers represents carriers in urban and suburban areas. The National Rural Carriers Association represents carriers in rural areas. Obviously, the American Postal Workers Union represents like clerks and the people that you see, like if you go into the post office, those are folks who are represented by APWU. And then there's the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, who are kind of like back of the office, like moving forklifts around and stuff, I think. I'm not totally sure exactly, frankly, what the National Postal Mail Handlers do. But anyway, so here's the APWU statement. The APWU is deeply concerned and troubled by the process that the Postal Board of Governors engaged in to select the new Postmaster General. The public should share our concern. Various new reports indicate that this Board of Governors, currently consisting of 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 1 independent. Okay, I guess I was wrong earlier. I thought 4 of them were Biden appointees. Although they could be Biden appointees even if they're Republicans or Democrats, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, the various news reports indicate that this Board of Governors, currently consisting of 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 1 independent, would only consider a new Postmaster General who had the approval of President Donald Trump. If these news reports are accurate, the Board of Governors has shamelessly and outrageously abdicated their independent responsibility in selecting a new Postmaster General. The 1970 Postal Reorganization Act created the modern Postal Service specifically to avoid political interference in the workings of the Postal Service. The PRA, the Postal Reorganization Reorganization Act followed the Great Postal Strike that not only uplifted the well-being of postal workers, but forced the needed change that freed the Postal Service from the political patronage that was crippling the Post Office Department at that time. Under the PRA, the hiring and firing of any Postmaster General falls under the sole authority of what was designed by Congress to be a fully independent Board of Governors. No president, past or present, or future, should have any say in who leads the independent Postal Service. The APWU is in the process of further researching the board's selection and will share more information as it comes to light. The hundreds of millions of people that rely on the Postal Service should be deeply concerned that the Board of Governors should select a Postmaster General from the Board of Directors of FedEx. FedEx is not only a major competitor of the Postal Service in the package market, but are part of the chorus of billionaires, profit-driven corporations, and Wall Street that advocate for major privatization of postal services. By cowering to this administration, the Board of Governors has likely chosen a fox to guard the hen house. The APWU will continue to oppose actions by any Postmaster General who takes steps to privatize and undermine the public postal service. So, yeah, there we go. We'll see what happens. Obviously, we'll be following it closely, and it's concerning. I don't know what else to say about it. It's really concerning. So, appreciate everybody tuning in. Steve mentions in the chat, DeJoy was a conflict of interest too. Indeed, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They're doubling down on that.
Yeah.
And I think the APWU is exactly right. I mean, I said it in the chat right before you read it, fox guarding the hen house, and that is exactly what it is. Someone who has direct interest in privatizing the service. Very, very concerning. Yeah, a bad signal for what's ahead, and it's going to take a lot of activity from the union. So, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I hope to see APWU, the letter carriers, rural carriers, everybody needs to be working together at this time to put up a united front.
Palace Real in the chat said, mail handlers process the mail that runs through the machines and usually ship out mail to local offices. So there you go. Thank you, Palace Real. Appreciate it. We've got a guest on the line now. Al Kuhn has called in. Let's bring him on the air. He's calling from a 256 area code. Al Kuhn is president of the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, Local 900 in Huntsville, Alabama. Al, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, appreciate you taking the time to call in. Can you tell folks what IATSE is?
IATSE, we are the labor behind all the movies and all the entertainment that happens in the United States and Canada. And we do concerts, conventions. We have locally Broadway Theater League. We got the Huntsville Symphony. And we also do festivals. So we set up and operate equipment, all the chain motors that you see the lighting and sound hung from, that's all us. When you're at a show and you see spotlights in the back, behind you that are lighting up the stage, that's also us. So we do a bit of everything, operate the board, soundboard, lighting board, consoles. So a little bit of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really exciting, and I love telling people anytime I hear anybody tell me that they went to a concert at the Orion or the VBC here in Huntsville, I was like, did you know that Union Labor made that happen, actually? Did you know that when you went to see Billy Strings or Snoop Dogg or whoever else at the Orion, that IATSE Local 900 did that? Well, now you do. You should tell everybody else. And a lot of people are really surprised by that because, they think, oh, Huntsville, Alabama, we're not exactly known for being the most dense union area, right? And so the idea that even our shows are put together by union labor is surprising to a lot of folks. So it's really, really cool to have you on the program and have you putting together entertainment for folks in Huntsville every weekend. How did you end up in this line of work? Like, how did you start working as a union stagehand?
It's kind of a mixed bag kind of thing. I retired from the Army at Redstone Arsenal after 20 wonderful years. And at the time, my spouse was getting into local theater in the Playhouse at the Von Braun Center. And she started getting into it, and of course that led to me starting to get into it and building sets and etc. And then it kind of morphed from there. And you were just talking about everywhere else here. I'm at Orion right now actually working. I had to take 15 minutes out of my busy schedule. We're setting up for the hospital. Huntsville Hospital has a big fundraising thing here, and the Abbott brothers are playing. So right now we're setting up for that.
Oh, that's fantastic. And what makes you want to stay in it? You know, obviously as a retired veteran, you know, there's probably lots of different jobs that you could do. What makes you want to stay a union stagehand?
Well, being in the union, the biggest thing about being in the union, to me anyway, is having voice. So you have some kind of a voice over your job and what it is that you do and how you're protected and everything else. I enjoy the work. I love it. And when I was in the Army, I was in charge of things my entire career pretty much. And now I'm the steward, like I'm in charge on this call. I have somebody watching over everybody for me right now. But basically, it's really exciting to see things happen, to, you know, see all the entertainers backstage and see the happy look on a lot of people's faces. So, and, you know, the money's not too bad. It's, I think that it's a very enjoyable gig, and I have a lot of friends that do this also.
Right. Well, speaking of that, you know, I want to let people know kind of, if this sounds interesting to them, I want to let people know kind of what to expect if they want to become a union stagehand. So what is the pay like for an IATSE Local 900 member in Huntsville?
So it's roughly, there may be a few cents difference between working with us at the Orion or at the Von Braun, but we're trying to iron that out so it'll all be the same rate. But your basic right in when you're brand new and you're learning how to push a box and all the safety things about being on trucks and on ramps, you start at $25 an hour. And then you work your way up depending on what your position is. If you end up being a rigger, and those are the monkey-like folks that are up in the steel, dropping ropes in and pulling chains up, they're making about $45 an hour right now. So the money's not too bad. You go past midnight and you're in time and a half. So it's okay.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely better than there are a lot of places that pay worse, that's for sure. And like you said, you know, being a union member, you get to have a say in what happens. You have a steward that's looking out for you. You have things like, you know, you get to negotiate contracts with the Orion and the VBC that you said that y'all are in the middle of kind of ironing out right now. And so that's all really exciting. What if, you know, I know that Adam works for IATSE 900. He's one of the box pushers, so to speak, sometimes on the weekend. And I know that
he does a little more than that.
And, you know, work in Huntsville in, you know, entertainment and setting up fundraisers or setting up concerts, it can kind of ebb and flow as far as how much, how much work there is. If somebody wanted to really go out and, make a career at this and travel, do opportunities exist for somebody? If I wanted to, you know, I joined Local 900 and I want to get into the stagehand work even more. Is there work that I can I transfer to like Atlanta or LA or New York?
Well, the short answer is absolutely yes. You can, once you have a skill set and you've worked with us for a while, then somebody else would like to pick you up, and you can transfer from our local to Atlanta or, you know, Vegas, and they have more full-time positions. We actually, we don't have anybody in Huntsville right now that is full-time. This is very part-time work, and it should appeal to a lot of folks because you can come in here and on a weekend, you can make a little bit of money, but it won't take away from your regular day job. So the gig environment is good, and it works for a whole lot of folks. We have people from the Huntsville City Schools who work for us. We have people from the Postal Service. We have folks from all walks of life that join up with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Adam himself is worker power campaign director during the day for Alabama Arise, and then sometimes on the weekend and at night he's a stagehand here in Huntsville. So,
right.
And that it's also worth just pointing out how the existence of Local 900 really throws a wrench in the idea that gig work can't be union, right? And that's always the conversation about like Uber or Lyft or these kind of gig jobs that, the companies will say, oh, well, people like flexibility, and so we can't have unions because unions are inflexible. And here I am talking right now to a person who works part-time as a union stagehand and is the president of his union. So just worth, poking a hole in that narrative while we have you, I think.
Well,
Yeah.
none of it is insurmountable. We have Feld Entertainment, which is one of the largest in the industry when it comes to Disney on Ice and a lot of the really big shows that are touring. They used to have the circus also. But those folks, the last time they came in for Disney on Ice, they were unionized, which was very refreshing, and they were a lot easier to deal with, in my opinion. So, yeah, it can happen anywhere.
Absolutely. Adam, were you about to say something?
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate what Al said about folks from all walks of life. It's a diverse group of people, but a great bunch of folks who work hard and look out for their brothers and sisters on the job. And that's the kind of environment that, it's gig work. It's something that you can do on the side, or if, like you said, Jacob, if it's something you really are passionate about. We have folks who do travel from Birmingham, go work shows down there or work shows in Nashville.
Chattanooga.
Some people decide to join the tours and go on the road with the touring companies. So, there's plenty of options. And like Al said, you can work your way up to rigger or other specialties. So it's a great opportunity. And you, best of all, you do get to be part of entertainment and see those happy faces and hear great music and just be a part of that. So it's a great experience.
So Al, if somebody
at the end of every single movie that you enjoy seeing on TV or Netflix or what have you, generally at the end in the credits, you will see the union bug, our little stamp, because we are involved in nearly all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll see a lot. Most of the time, you'll see at least the IATSE, SAG-AFTRA, and the Teamsters. And I think maybe there's a couple of others that are in a lot of them. But yeah, it is really cool. I always stay for the credits now, like for the last 5 years. Whenever it was that Adam joined IATSE and I got turned on to IATSE, I always stay for the credits now, and I wait and I point out the bug. I say, look, everybody, made by union folks. So
that's it.
Al, if somebody's hearing this, we're on the radio here in Huntsville. We're also on the radio in other places. But if somebody wants to become a stagehand in Huntsville with Local 900, how do they get in touch with you?
All right. The primary way to contact us is through our email, and it's IATSE Local 900 Trustee, TRUSTEE, @gmail.com. IATSE Local 900 Trustee @gmail.com. Having said that, if you want to leave your name and a phone number in a text message, you can use my phone. And my number is 256-509-0682. And I tend to answer my phone, but if I don't know who it is, I won't. So if they give me a text, I will pass the information on to whom needs to have it.
Al Kuhn, president of IATSE Local 900 in Huntsville, Alabama. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, guys, really, really appreciate Local 900. They have been great to me. They have shown me the ropes, literally, and, were there for me when I needed work, and I've met some outstanding people. So it really is a career to consider. Anywhere there's entertainment, there's IATSE folks
That's right.
doing that work and putting it on. So it's a really cool job, and I really enjoyed it, and appreciate Al coming on today.
Yep. We're going to take a break. We will be right back with, we've got a guest coming on, Joe Cleveland, to talk about his independent candidacy for office. We're also going to be talking about NYOSH cuts and more, so stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free. You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. Today on the show, we're going to talk about ICE targeting union organizers. We're also going to be talking about Joe Cleveland and his independent candidacy for office here in Alabama. Also talking about last week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch. All that and more on today's show. If you want to be part of the program today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can give us a call at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week at any time, but the lines are open right now. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm, but we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to TVLR.fm/donate or Patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We got a bunch of cool merch for sale at TVLR.fm/store. And as a note, as of 2 weeks ago, we finally shipped off the last of the merch orders and fundraising drive gifts from last year. Very sorry for the delay on that. It took a long time to get the shirts printed, but we finally done that. So if you have ordered something from us, and I did check again yesterday, okay, so this is still current. If you have ordered anything from us, or if you are expecting a gift from the fundraising drive, then please reach out to us now. Send me an email, tvlr.fm/contact, because if you have not gotten it yet, that means a mistake has been made somewhere. And while I never make mistakes, so that would be weird if that happened, I don't know how that would happen, but we'll figure it out for you. So reach out to us, tvlr.fm/contact, if you have not gotten your order, because you should have it by now. Finally, if you're a member of a union, then think about getting your local or national to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
And let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. As most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in. Whether you're a first-time listener or a loyal fan, we appreciate you spending some time with us.
Absolutely. Another reminder, Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive with the National Association of Letter Carriers and the U.S. Postal Service is going on right now. So drop whatever you're doing, go get a Walmart bag, put some non-perishable food items in it, and put that bag by your mailbox. I did that this morning. You need to do that this morning before your letter carrier comes. This is a 5-alarm fire. Go do that right now. We'll still be on the radio or wherever you're listening to us when you come back. Joe, listening to us on Facebook, has got his food donation ready. Mel says, good morning, Joe and VLR. I'm assuming Mel has done that as well. Hopefully, sound off in the chat if you have left your Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive donation in at your mailbox. Isn't it, as Steve says, isn't it ironic that it's a Walmart bag? I mean, Walmart bag is like a Kleenex, right? I mean, that's kind of, I don't know, maybe that's just my family. I don't know. But saying Walmart bag just feels like saying plastic bag, like Kleenex. Kleenex is not, I mean, that's like a brand, right? It's not. Yeah. And so that's how I feel about Walmart bags. Maybe Maybe that's just my white trash family, though. I don't know. Go do that right now. Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. Last Week in Southern Labor is a segment that we do every week where we take a look at what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to. Here's what they were up to from May the 2nd to the 9th. In new union campaigns, 150 security guards for Paragon Systems in Houston, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Government Security Officers of America, UGSOA, Local 333. 746 workers at Brilliant Corporation in Lee's Summit, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. 3 workers at IMI Edmonton in Edmonton, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 89. 14 workers at Quest Diagnostics in Marietta, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 728. 46 workers at Compass Behavioral Services in Richmond, Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 322. 6 workers at Feldkamp Mechanical in Lexington, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Association of Plumbers and Steamfitters, UA, Local 452. 12 workers at Starbucks in Richmond, Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United. In campaign updates, the United Auto Workers, UAW, continue their push to unionize the Kentucky Blue Oval SK plant. The Courier-Journal has a profile of the safety problems in the plant, finding chemicals, mold, broken bones, and retaliation for reporting safety concerns. The UAW responded to the story in a statement saying that Ford, which is one of the companies in the joint venture establishing Blue Oval, should know better. In election results, 18 workers at Starbucks in Lawrenceville, Georgia, voted 4-12 against unionization with Starbucks Workers United. That is the first such lopsided loss for the union that I've seen in this campaign, I think. Really bad news, but there is going to be a union election at Starbucks in Huntsville next week. Hopefully that one will go better. 92 workers at the Bluegrass Energy Cooperative Corporation in Nicholasville, Kentucky, voted 32-10 in favor of unionization with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 2100. 13 workers at Hydro Evac in McDonough, Georgia, voted 10-2 in favor of unionization with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE, Local 926. 6 workers at Pye Barker Fire and Safety in Richmond, Virginia, voted 3-2 in favor of unionization with the UA's Road Sprinkler Fitter, Local 669. 18 workers at Diversicare of Pell City in Pell City, Alabama, voted 13-5 in favor of unionization with the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU. 6 security guards at Secure Remedy in Washington, D.C., voted 1-0 in favor of unionization with the National Capital Union for Security Officers. 51 workers at Goodrich Corporation in Jacksonville, Florida, voted against unionization with the IAMAW. 14 workers at Newbold Services in London, Arkansas, voted 8-0 in favor of unionization with the Labor's International Union of North America. In grievances, unfair labor practices, and court cases, a federal district judge in Rhode Island issued a preliminary injunction against the closure of the Institute of Museum and Library Services and the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, FMCS, as well as the Minority Business and Development Agency. The FMCS is particularly important for unions because it has provided mediation services during contract negotiations and grievance procedures for decades. It was founded in 1947, so the courts stopping the disassembly of that agency is really important. The Federal Education Association, FEA, an NEA affiliate, which represents educators at DoD schools, filed their own lawsuit against Trump's executive order banning collective bargaining for most federal workers. In strikes and bargaining updates, the U.S. Department of Labor is ending mental health care and child care services for its own staff. The union plans to file a grievance alleging this violates the contract and multiple executive orders. UPS said in an earnings call that they will be laying off 20,000 workers in response to anticipated lower volume from Amazon because of tariffs. The Teamsters hit back strongly, saying there will be a fight if the company comes after union jobs. National Nurses United members, NNU, in Asheville, North Carolina, held a rally to demand improvements to their health care. Communication Workers of America, CWA members at AT&T Southwest ratified their new 4-year collective bargaining agreement, which includes an immediate 5% raise and a 15% raise over the life of the 4-year contract. CWA also says this contract includes the first reduction in health care costs in 15 years. In political and legislative updates, a new Postmaster General has been selected. David Steiner, a board member of FedEx, postal unions like the NALC and APWU, issued statements condemning the move as a step towards privatization. Trump announced more tariffs, this time on foreign films. IATSE and the Teamsters issued statements of support. The UAW released a report explaining how U.S. automotive manufacturers could ramp up domestic production in response to tariffs. Coal miners for decades have been able to get free black lung screenings from the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, NYOSH, but Trump just cut that program. The Kentucky Center for Economic Policy built a tool where folks can track the impacts on Kentucky jobs and services from the White House and DOGE, identifying at least 39 separate and discrete impacts to the state, representing lost jobs, fewer protections for Kentucky workers, and less revenue for the state. The U.S. House held a hearing on workers' compensation for federal workers where Republicans said the benefits were, quote, overly generous. The National Association of Letter Carriers president, Brian Renfro, spoke in support of the workers' compensation program. Florida's legislative session ended last week with some good news. A bill meant to roll back child labor protections failed to pass. McKenna Schuler reported on the news for the Orlando Weekly. That's it for our union updates. If we missed anything, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact, and we'll try to include it in next week's roundup. Also, as a reminder, there are some headlines that don't make it into the radio segment. So if you want to get the full Last Week in Southern Labor, you can subscribe to the newsletter at tvlr.fm. We also did not get the newsletter out last week, so this week's newsletter will be a 2-week compilation. Steve in the chat said Starbucks is trying to close one of the union stores here in Atlanta. That is, that's not good. The POTUS has already walked back the IATSE tariffs. Has that happened? The foreign film tariffs? Surely not. That's what Steve says, though. Steve also says, I tried to watch O'Brien's interview with Lori Chavez DeReamer, Total Bootlickers. Yeah, it was really... I don't know if you saw, Steve, that Sean O'Brien also had Andrew Cuomo on his podcast just last week in an attempt to rehabilitate Cuomo's image. Just insane. I don't understand it. But we've got our guest on the program, Joe Cleveland. Joe Cleveland is a community member, also a member and recording secretary of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW Local Lodge 291, and announcing for the first time his independent candidacy for Alabama State House District 35. Joe, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
It's good to see you, Jacob.
Good to see you. Good to hear from you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this morning. We want to talk, obviously, about your candidacy for State House here in Alabama, but I also want to try to give folks an impression of you just as a person generally. So can you talk to us about just some of your background? Like, what do you think is important for folks to know about how you grew up, what your early life was like, where you have lived, stuff like that?
All right. Well, I was born and raised in Talladega. I went to Munford Elementary School and middle school, but I attended high school at Hope Academy in Talladega. That was at the Presbyterian Home for Children. But after high school, I moved to Memphis, Tennessee for 2 years to attend a preaching school up there. Afterwards, I moved back to Talladega. I started dating my wife in 2014 and married her in 2016. So in 2017, I had to start working a couple other jobs. I started working at a Dollar General and a small machine shop. I didn't have any kind of training working as a machinist. So when I started working there, I started working for $8 an hour. I moved from that machine shop to Talladega Casting and Machine for a little raise. I worked there for about another year. And then I moved to the Anniston Army Depot and worked there for about a year as a term employee. And when I was there, I was a member of the AFGE. Worked at each shop for about a year and learned as much as I could. And then when I was laid off from the depot, I started working at a local foundry as a CNC machinist. And I've been there since 2020.
So as as a member of the union now, and you were previously a member of AFGE, which I didn't realize that. I don't know how that never came up. But, being in the South, me, for example, I'm basically the only member of my family who has been in a union. Was it the same way for you, or, is there more of a history in your family of unionism?
No, I wasn't very familiar with unions until I started working at the depot and learned a little bit about the AFGE. But there are some differences between AFGE and other trade unions. For example, out at the depot, they're not allowed to go on strike. They have other restrictions. But once I moved to the foundry and started working with the machinist union, there's a big difference, and working in the union, I've learned quite a bit. Like you said, I'm the recording secretary for the local 291, and doing that, I keep up with the minutes for the meetings and handle mail coming in, going out. But I'm also the vice president for the Alabama State Council of Machinists, and that's where the machinist union in Alabama does their political work. Trying to speak with representatives and senators over whatever bills are going on at the time. But I've also gotten involved with the grievance committee at the foundry and the contract negotiation committee. Now, people in Alabama, a lot of people have negative opinions about the union. They say that unions are owned by the Democrats, and that's not true. Unions are made up of organized working class people trying to fight for better wages and better working conditions in their workplace. Now, some of them are Democrats and some of them are Republicans. And I haven't checked with every union member in the state, but I would guess that the majority of the union members in Alabama vote Republican. But unions are democracy. So if the majority of the membership votes to support the Republican in a race, then that's who the union's going to support. But if they vote to support the Democrat or the independent, that's who they're going to support. The union is a democracy. Now, another reason why people have negative opinions about the union is that they say that, they think of it as a third party. They say, we already have one boss. We don't need or want another one. But the union isn't a third-party institution that's trying to act like your boss. You are the union. When you work together to try to make your workplace better, you're working as a union. So why is it better to work with a union? It's because when you work with a union, you get a voice and you get a vote in what goes on at the workplace. You get a contract that guarantees your wages and your benefits. It's better to work with a union because you get an extra layer of protection from unfair practices and a way to resolve disputes fairly. It's because when the working class sticks together, we're stronger. And when we allow ourselves to be divided by billionaires, bosses, big money politicians, we're weak enough to control. That's why it's better to work together as a union. Union strength comes from worker solidarity, and worker solidarity is the only way to make any real progress.
Yeah, I agree with that. Obviously, folks know that I agree with that, but it's always good to hear from folks who it's not as if they were kind of union diaper babies, or they didn't grow up in it, and they kind of learned about the culture of democracy within a union and the value that can bring. And really, I mean, frankly, just how common sense it is. I mean, fundamentally, what it comes down to is, do you want to have a voice in your workplace? Do you want to have some level of power and some constraints on what your boss can do to you? And I think everybody wants that, right? And it's the bosses and the billionaires and the big money politicians who want to keep that from us. And so I think that, that kind of, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that has kind of led you to deciding to run for office, is seeing, these forces, put up barriers to working people making their lives better. But can you talk about that in your own words? Like, what made you decide, as a working machinist who obviously already has his hands full, right? I mean, you're married, you have a child, you hold multiple offices within your union, you've got enough on your plate to keep yourself occupied. And so why make the decision to run for office at all?
Well, it's something that I thought about for a long time. But the government in Alabama has been opposed to the working class coming together for a good long while. There's several examples with the Warrior Met coal miner strike, the interference in the Mercedes union election by that city councilman. Mm-hmm. But last year, when SB 231 was being discussed in committee, I attended the public hearing about that bill, and the room was packed full of union members from several different unions: machinists, steel workers, iron workers, CWA, AFGE, and others that all come to speak to this committee about why it was a bad idea to punish companies for voluntary union recognition. Now, the room was filled to capacity, and there was workers spilled out in the hallway and in the next room over where they were able to listen in on the meeting. But the committee spent their time going over a number of other issues that wasn't what everybody was there to discuss. Mm-hmm. A good amount of time was spent on renaming the Department of Labor to the Department of Workforce. Another big chunk of time was spent on what the official native state grass of Alabama should be. Mm-hmm. But when the time came to address the issue, y'all were there. When the time came to address the issue everybody was there to talk about, then there was only enough time to allow 3 people to speak for just a few minutes each. And after each of the 3 union members spoke, the committee members asked about how the process of union recognition works and basic questions about organizing and NLRB elections. And they were unfamiliar with the process that they were voting to change. Mm-hmm. And when my senator called, my senator that was on the committee called unions a necessary evil, I made up my mind that we needed to have more working class people and union members in office. So right. That's when I made up my mind about that.
And so, then the next question that follows, I've mentioned that you are running as an independent. Why run independent rather than as a Republican and maybe primarying your state House representative as a Republican or running as a Democrat? Why run independent?
Well, I believe one of the major problems that we have in the country comes from working class people allowing themselves to be divided up into different camps. The more time that we spend fighting each other over wedge issues and things like that, the weaker we are. And I want to represent the ideas and the needs that the people that live in my district have, and not necessarily what the party line is. Sometimes that's going to fall on the side of the Republicans, and sometimes that'll go along with the Democrats. But the most honest thing for me to do is to run as an independent, to represent the people that live here and not the parties. Mm. Now, I had considered running as a Republican. I went to a Republican Party meeting, but I thought the same thing about the Democrats, attended a Democrat county party meeting. But it's a more honest thing to do for me to run as an independent because I have no intention of towing either party line.
And so what are, if you were to give people 3 to 5 things that you're running on, you mentioned that the thing that really kind of solidified your decision to run was kind of seeing in person in Montgomery just how disconnected these folks are from the very things that they are seeking to change, the rules that they're seeking to impose on working people. And so you felt like working people deserve more representation, and that's something that we've talked about on the show. Only like 2% of politicians come from working class backgrounds. The rest of them are lawyers, business owners, folks like that, right? Not very many politicians come from working class backgrounds like Joe Cleveland. And so, that's why you decided to run. But what are you running on? What are some of the policies that you're going to be fighting for?
Well, what I'm attempting to work on is building a working class platform for Alabama. I'm wanting to encourage other union members and working class people to run for office. What I'm hoping we're able to do as working class people is focus our effort on one chamber of the state government. If one of us makes it into the state house and another makes it into the state senate and another becomes a city councilman, another one becomes a member of the school board, we're not going to have as much power because we're going to be as spread out. We wouldn't have as much ability to make a change as we could by all focusing on the state house together. And with several union members all focusing on the state house of representatives, we'll be able to collectively bargain for all the workers in Alabama. For the same kind of things that you fight for in a union contract are the same kind of things that I want to fight for all workers in Alabama, for higher wages, for a secure retirement, things along those lines. What I would hope to accomplish would be a better standard of living. I'm on the phone, son. Go on. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Right.
That's parenthood.
Yeah. Yeah. Things that I would want to accomplish would be a better standard of living for working class people in any way that I can achieve that. I want to try to focus on lowering costs of utilities, groceries, other necessities, increasing wages, trying to bring in higher paying jobs, but also by raising the minimum wage. Alabama doesn't have a minimum wage law. That's why our minimum wage is set by the federal standard. I think that we need a higher minimum wage in Alabama.
Yeah.
Fairer taxes, protecting people's rights to organize together into a union. That's going to be an important issue for me. I want to try to do as much as I can to help out our kids. I've got 3 kids that go to Montford Elementary School, and we live on the end of the school bus route. So in the hotter months, when my kids get off the school bus, they're red in the face and they're sweating, and they don't have any kind of climate control on the school buses. So maybe trying to secure funding for newer buses with climate control. Making sure that kids don't go hungry at school by protecting free lunch and breakfast programs, trying to protect the services that the kids receive at school. I've got one son that gets speech therapy at school, and also trying to promote training in the trades at schools. But I want to try to bring in other working class people and union people that are interested in doing the same kind of thing and work together on hammering out a platform that we can all run on together, whether they're running as an independent, running as a Republican, or running as a Democrat. I would encourage them to run as an independent. I think that would make a stronger statement. But once we have a few other union members that are willing to run, we'll hammer out a workers' platform for Alabama that I believe will be it'll be a lot better. It'll be the way to go for us.
Well, we're going to keep track of that, obviously, and we're going to look forward to talking to you and maybe some other working folks who are going to be running for State House here soon. Is there anything that you think is important for folks to know as far as what differentiates you from your opponent? Is there anything that you think is important to say there?
Well, Steve Hurst is the representative for my district right now, and he's been in Alabama politics for a long time. He's been in the State House of Representatives since 1998, and he's run unopposed since 2014. Now, I believe he's a good man. He's a business owner, and he's never been anything but kind in any dealing I've had with him. So I have nothing against Steve as a person, but I do have some disagreements with him. And I have to follow through with what I believe. Now, I believe that a politician should never go unopposed. In the democratic process, there should always be a choice. I believe that we need more working class people in government, and that'll improve life for everybody. I believe that we need more young people getting involved in the process and being willing to serve in government. Participating in protests makes a difference, but organizing together and getting into office is the best way to make a change.
Joe Cleveland, independent candidate for Alabama State House District 35, also member and recording secretary for the IAMAW Local Lodge 291. If folks want to learn more about your candidacy, particularly, and about your interest in seeing more workers and union members run across the state, where can they find more?
You can go to votejoecleveland.com. That redirects to a link tree. There's a Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, but there's also a volunteer form and a tab for how to contact me. Now, union members interested in running for office should fill out the volunteer form on my link tree in the box labeled what type of work would you be interested in, select running for office. Now, I'll contact you as soon as I have an opportunity, and I'll set up a time for us to go over how to run for office and any ways that I can help you. But there are other ways to help with the effort, even if you're not interested in necessarily running for office. Please reach out and we'll work together.
All right. Joe Cleveland, really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to take a break really quick. We're going to be right back to talk about Boss Watch and NYOSH canceling the black lung screenings. Just absolutely ludicrous. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at IAMAW44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can give us a call. The phones are open. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. We also take voicemails. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail at any time throughout the week, you are welcome. 844-899-8857. Jacob in the chat, different one, says, I'm on the phone, son. Go on. The people's candidate. I thought that was pretty funny. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We have 30-something folks watching the stream right now. Only 16 people have liked, though. Go ahead and like the stream. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. Let's do Boss Watch, and then we'll see how much time is left for other stuff. Also, Haley says, from my conversations with Joe, I believe he opposes both parties. He opposes that both parties make it difficult for working class people to get involved and don't fight for workers' unions or families. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's get to Boss Watch and see how much time we have for other segments. Boss Watch is a segment that we do every week where we take a look at what bosses are up to, particularly, though not exclusively, in the southern United States. We're going to head over to Florida, where Marriott Vacations Worldwide, which sell vacation timeshare programs for hotels and vacation clubs, violated federal law when they failed to accommodate an employee's request not to work Saturdays so she could observe Sabbath. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission charged in a lawsuit that they filed last week. According to the lawsuit, Management at Marriott Vacations Worldwide and Marriott Ownership Resorts initially allowed an employee who is a Seventh-day Adventist a religious accommodation that allowed her to avoid Saturday shifts. After a change in management, though, the companies began scheduling her for Saturday shifts. After the employee made repeated complaints, they changed her schedule, negatively impacting her sales and commissions, and continued to schedule her for Saturdays, forcing her to choose between showing up to work and her religious practice. This led her to resign. Such conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination because of an individual's religion and requires employers to reasonably accommodate an employee's religious observance or practice unless doing so would cause an undue hardship. So the EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Florida after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its administrative conciliation process. EEOC Acting Chair Andrea Lucas said, employers need to remember that religious rights are not second-class rights, but rather are part of our nation's first principles. Employers should take compliance with religious accommodation requirements under Title VII as seriously as compliance with their disability and pregnancy accommodations obligations. Very seriously. Staying in Florida, we have more discriminators in Florida. This one is 3 Florida construction parts and auto mechanic companies. They have agreed to pay $215,000 and furnish other relief to settle a race and national origin discrimination lawsuit filed by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the federal agency announced today. According to the EEOC's lawsuit, Trebor USA Corporation, Colt Truck Care, LLC, and Wholesale Building Products, LLC, subjected Black and Hispanic employees to racial slurs, including supervisors calling employees the N-word, lazy, spick, I don't know, that I've never heard that one, and boys. The EEOC further alleged that the company was aware of the harassment as one of the supervisors had previously been disciplined for making racist comments in the workplace. Nevertheless, when one of the employees reported the abuse to Human Resources, he was fired within 2 weeks. This alleged conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which protects individuals from workplace discrimination and harassment. So the EEOC filed suit on September 30th, 2024, in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its conciliation process. In addition to over $215,000 in damages, the 3-year consent decree settling the suit requires the companies to amend their equal employment opportunity practices, conduct training for human resources personnel, management personnel, and all non-supervisory employees, provide reports to the EEOC, and post anti-discrimination notices. In addition, the companies agreed to design an internal audit of the company's work assignments to ensure work is not assigned based on national origin and or race. Evangeline Hawthorne, district director for the EEOC's Miami district, said employers must take reports of harassment seriously. When an employee complains, the law requires employers to thoroughly investigate and take effective action to remedy a hostile work environment. Heading over to Texas, the U.S. Department of Labor has filed suit against the U.S. Postal Service for wrongful termination of an employee who fell while delivering mail and reported the work-related injury. An investigation by the Department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration found the Postal Service violated the whistleblower provisions of the Occupational Safety and Health Act by firing the worker on February 27, 2024, 10 days after the injury was reported. The department's lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Texas asks the court to hold USPS liable for illegal retaliation and require payment of back wages and damages. OSHA's Whistleblower Protection Program enforces the whistleblower provisions of 25 whistleblower statutes protecting employees from retaliation for reporting violations of workplace, airline, anti-money laundering, commercial motor carrier, consumer products, criminal antitrust, environmental financial reform, food safety, health insurance reform, maritime motor vehicle safety, nuclear pipeline, public transportation agency, railroad, safety and health, securities, and tax laws. For more information on whistleblower protections, you can visit OSHA's Whistleblower Protections Program's website. And finally, This segment of Boss Watch, Union Busters, covering national updates, is sponsored by Labor Lab. Labor Lab is an employer watchdog organization. They are committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by combing through reports that Union Busters are required to file with the Department of Labor. Here are the new filings from last week. Real Alloy in Ohio hired Alfred Lacey for $2,000 a day. Workers still won their union election, although the Union Busters did not file until after the election was over. Peachtree Hospitality Management, doing business as AC Marriott in California, hired armor and royalty consultant. Workers withdrew their petition for a union election, and Union Busters did not file until after the petition was withdrawn. Dreyer's Grand Ice Cream in California hired Action Resources for $3,750 a day. That money paid off for the company because the workers did lose that union election, 115 to 160. The Union Busters also didn't file until after the election was over. Dolomite Products Company in New York hired Labor Consulting Group for $395 an hour. Trap Rock and Granite Quarries in Illinois hired Labor Consulting Group for $395 an hour. Workers withdrew their petition for a union election, and the Union Busters did not file until after the election petition was withdrawn. Jersey Shore University Medical Center in New Jersey hired Taryn Becker. They did not disclose the amount. In addition, the following LM20s, the following filings were amended. Pantera Consulting amended their LM20 for Amazon in Illinois to add their compensation rate, $375 an hour, add the union, the Teamsters, and add the employer EIN. So we've got a little bit of time left. Like I said, if anybody wants to call in, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Let's talk about this NYOSH stuff. You know, we've been talking about the cuts to NYOSH for the last several weeks. We did interview some people who work for the National Institutes of Occupational Safety and Health, members of the union there. That agency is being demolished. 2/3 of the staff are being laid off, including most of the staff who do these lung cancer screenings, the black lung screenings. And so that program has been cut. This article from CBS News says West Virginia coal miners lose black lung screenings after Trump slashes the worker safety agency NYOSH. And they talk about how, you know, people in the area are really concerned. Marion Tennant, who says he was destined to work in the mines, talks about how important it has been for him to be able to get these black lung screenings, and how he's afraid for younger workers. He told CBS that what's going to happen, I'm afraid, is our younger ones, before they realize what they've done to their body, they're going to have black lung, and the numbers is going to rise. NYOSH employee Catherine Blackwood, PhD scientist at the NYOSH facility in Morgantown, West Virginia, said, "I'm angry that we are just being cast aside." Her job was eliminated April 1st, along with over 200 others at the facility, from the people who oversee mine safety to those who study cancer-causing chemicals in firefighters. The PhD scientist said, "I'm really worried and fearful about what the impacts are going to be on the rest of us." And so this is really difficult to kind of understand the reasoning for this. It's just so cruel. And, there are, I don't even know if there is a single other state in the country who voted for Trump in higher numbers than West Virginia, and in higher numbers than West Virginia coal miners, right? And West Virginia coal miners have seen black lung rates increase substantially. When we talked to the NYOSH folks, we mentioned how just 15 to 20 years ago, only 1 in 30 coal miners developed black lung after 20 years in the mines. Only 1 in 30. Right? That is, it's still too high, right? We need to work to get that down because black lung is just a terrible, terrible disease. There is no cure for it. You can only slow its progression. But slowing its progression, these cancer screenings are really important in being able, these black lung screenings are really important in being able to slow its progression. But now that rate has gone from 1 in 30, just 15 to 20 years ago, to 1 in 5 today. 20% of coal miners in the Appalachia region are going to develop black lung after 20 years in the mines. That's where the number is at today. With all of these cuts to black lung screening, to other programs protecting coal miners, to the Mine Safety and Health Administration, to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, to all of those, that there is no way that number is going to do anything but go up. And so in response to some of the continued attacks on NYOSH, the UMWA issued a statement with UMWA President Cecil Roberts saying what happened at NYOSH is nothing short of shameful, telling hardworking, dedicated employees that they no longer have a job at 6:30 p.m. on a Friday after the workday is done and with no forewarning is cowardly, heartless, and utterly unacceptable. And that is another thing about this is just, in addition to this being bad for the people outside of the agency, right? This is going to be really bad for coal miners. This is going to be really bad for people whose family are coal miners. It's also bad for the people who work at NYOSH, and it's being done in just, like Roberts said, cowardly, heartless, unacceptable. Roberts continued, "Let me be clear, this is not just an attack on jobs. This is an attack on the very foundation of worker safety in the United States of America. The dismantling of the Respiratory Disease Division at NYOSH is not just a bureaucratic shuffle. It is the elimination of our nation's leading defense against black lung disease and other respiratory illnesses that afflict miners and workers across this country. This division is responsible for developing life-saving coal dust and silica monitors. It runs the Miner X-ray Surveillance Program. It oversees MSHA's Part 90 program, a program that literally exists to save the lungs and lives of American coal miners. Now, with the stroke of a pen and the cowardice of an evening layoff notice, those protections are being stripped away. Who is going to monitor dust levels in our mines? Who will ensure the next generation of miners doesn't end up with the same black lungs as their fathers and grandfathers? The United Mine Workers of America will not stand silently by while decades of progress are gutted overnight. This isn't just detrimental, it's catastrophic. It's detrimental to coal miners, detrimental to American workers, detrimental to American families. The UMWA's number one focus has always been and always will be the health and safety of our members. We will fight tooth and nail to ensure these programs are restored, these protections are preserved, and that our nation never forgets the sacrifices miners made to power this country." And I don't know how you come to any other conclusion but that Trump is not remembering and is forgetting the sacrifices that coal miners have made to power this country and are still making to power this country. It's just so gross. And Blandscape in the chat says, the reasoning is tax cuts for billionaires and Republican Party donors. No need to overthink the painfully obvious. Yeah, that's true. And they're all but saying it too, right? They're coming out with these budgets that cut all sorts of stuff, and they're talking about huge tax cuts for wealthy people.
It is a wealth transfer upwards. Yeah. And they are unleashing what little guardrails companies, have to abide by, right? We have certain guardrails in this country which are insufficient compared to a lot of other modern advanced economies, but even those are being taken away, and really capital is being unleashed to behave as reckless as they want.
Yeah. We're wrapping up here on the radio, Adam. About 60 seconds. What plugs do we have?
Real quick, I do want to always encourage people to go to labornotes.org/events. Coming up, they have a steward's workshop, Thinking Like an Organizer, on May 28th. So that'll be a really good one. And they also have in person the New Orleans Troublemaker School on May 31st. I know we've got some New Orleans folks who listen. If you are in Alabama, Alabama Arise is going to have a legislative recap on May 20th. It's online at 6 p.m., so you can go to alarise.org to find out more and register for that. Shout out again to Starbucks Workers United, who are organizing here in Huntsville. I believe their election is coming up this upcoming week. And also want to remind folks that we are proud to be on Means TV. We did join Means TV last month. You can subscribe with our discount code TVLR and receive 20% off either your first month or the entire year if you want to buy it that way. So do remember to sign up for our email list and get on that tvlr.fm.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Adam. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We've got a whole second half of the show lined up, so find us on Facebook or YouTube to continue listening. We're going to be talking to the National Treasury Employees Union national president and a local chapter president of the CFPB. We'll also be talking about layoffs at UPS. We'll be reacting to Abigail Spanberger denouncing repeal of right to work. Going to be talking about a lot more. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR if you want to call in. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. All right, folks. Appreciate you staying tuned. We are now off of the radio. We're going to take a break really quickly, and we are going to be right back with Overtime.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to call in while we're live, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. And you can leave us a voicemail at any time throughout the week. Let's talk about this farm worker stuff. ICE seems to be targeting union members as they scramble to get deportation numbers up. That's what this report from The Intercept seems to imply. From Noah Horowitz, the title of the piece is "They Actually Had a List. ICE Arrests Workers Involved in Landmark Labor Rights Case." I don't know if I've been turned up a little bit. I'm sounding like I'm breaking a little bit at the top. I don't know. But so here's from this Intercept article. An immigration raid in western New York on Friday targeted a group of immigrants involved in a landmark statewide effort by farm workers to unionize. On Friday morning at around 9:30 a.m., federal agents in unmarked cars bearing no agency insignia pulled over a bus in Albion, New York, about 35 miles west of Rochester, and took 14 people, all employees of Lynette and Sons Farms, into custody. Several of the workers taken into custody on Friday have been active in efforts to unionize year-round employees at the company, including at least one who has spoken publicly in favor of joining the United Farm Workers of America, according to Elizabeth Strader, Director of Strategic Campaigns for UFW, the storied labor union. Strader says, "We are concerned at the appearance of targeting publicly pro-union worker leaders." And here's, just really, really the crazy part. The raid did not appear to be a broad sweep, but rather a targeted enforcement action aimed at specific people, according to sources who have been in contact with the families and spoke to The Intercept on condition of anonymity to candidly discuss a sensitive legal situation. Quote, "At first we thought they were enforcing a deportation order, that they had one person and that they are looking for, and then everyone else got dragged in. That's kind of standard," said one of the people with knowledge of the raid. "But this was strange because they actually had a list of most of the workers on the bus." The company issued a statement basically saying that they don't like how this was done and specifically denying allegations that they are responsible for the raid, saying in part, quote, "We strongly reject the United Farm Workers UFW's irresponsible and self-serving public claims suggesting that these workers were targeted in retaliation for union activity. These claims are categorically false. The detained workers are not part of a bargaining unit themselves, a fact highlighted prominently in the Lynette statement. The company made no mention, however, that the detained workers were part of a group actively seeking representation with the United Farm Workers." And so they explain the kind of context behind the raid. They say that the raid in Albion comes amid a contentious union battle at Lynette, which has included worker allegations of union busting and intimidation by owner Darren Roberts. In 2023, Roberts allegedly drove a UFW organizer off farm property and berated an employee with whom the organizer had been speaking, according to an unfair labor practice complaint filed by the union. In 2024, the union agreed to drop the complaint in exchange for guarantees from the company that would not interfere with, surveil, or interrogate workers about meeting with the UFW. But Strader said, quote, "A lot of New York growers have viciously fought against the concept of farm workers having labor rights." And so they continue talking about that in the article. It's a really good piece. Recommend folks reading it. I'm leaving out some of it. Want to push people there. Don't want to just take it. Just take the piece. But it really is, crazy. They say that Strader did decline to comment on whether the workers in Albion were specifically targeted or who may have given their names to ICE. Speaking generally, however, she said that anti-labor immigration enforcement usually occurs in two ways. Quote from Strader. This is the idea of an individual or company using ICE by sending in tips, and then there is a different concept of the agency itself taking initiative to target workers who are organizing, Strader told The Intercept. In this case, there is still a lot we need to learn, but I'd be alarmed about either of those options or anything in between. It's really scary. It's also worth noting that Alfred Lalo Juarez Zeffirino in Washington, another farm worker union organizer, is still in custody and was just denied bail last week. The government has finally said, after weeks of not explaining why they picked him up, that they picked him up because he had a deportation order, but the family claims they never received the deportation order, and it is just a fact that ICE is just generally unprofessional. It is not good at getting stuff out or to the right place. They have even outright forged documents before, so who knows exactly what happened. Also, I think it was either the Texas Tribune or the Texas Observer who has noted that some ICE prosecutors in Texas are literal, actual white supremacists who have been posting white supremacy on Twitter.com. We do know, however, that Lalo, like I said, is a prominent farm worker union organizer and that he has no criminal record. Zero criminal record. And so, as I'm seeing this and I'm thinking through it, there could be multiple reasons for targeting union organizers. Like Strader said, you could have just the kind of most villainous thing that you can think of, and honestly kind of the most straightforward thing, which is that there are companies that don't like that these immigrants are getting too uppity, and so they're letting ICE know that they're here without documentation, come and pick them up, and then ICE is doing that, right? And so that could be the case, and that's happened before. But it could also be part of ICE being lazy, right? Because the reality is, it is just a fact of the matter that there are not actually that many hardened criminals here without documentation. Okay? That is just a fact. We do not have hordes of undocumented immigrants going around killing, attacking, being violent. There's not a lot of those people, right? And it's also true that of the ones who are actually hardened criminals, gang members, they are a little bit harder to find. And so union organizers, those folks are more public, right? You've got their names in the papers sometimes being quoted. People know who they are in the community. And so if it's just a numbers game, then the people who are sticking their head outs, it's just easier to lop those heads off and to take them, right? Because they're more public. And you can pick them up and you can take them pretty easily. Whatever the reason for targeting union organizers, though, and whatever you think our immigration policy should be, going after union organizers first is bad for native-born American workers, and it's obviously bad for immigrants. What it will do to the rest of the undocumented workforce is push them further underground. It will make them less likely to protest poor wages, bad and unsafe working conditions, sexual harassment, etc., right? And we know obviously that undocumented immigrants are just generally less likely to protest and do things like that because of the precarious nature under which they reside in the United States, right? And so by pushing them further underground and making them even less likely to try to protest, that is going to degrade their already poor working conditions, and that will hurt the job market, right? If you are an American or a legal immigrant and trying to look for a job, and you have some that are unwilling to say anything at all, then that's just going to make it more difficult for folks, right? Doesn't help you. It does not help you as an American, as a human. Doing this kind of thing does not help you. More immigration news, by the way, that doesn't help anybody. Alabama graduate student Eloriza Duruti is self-deporting. The government claimed he was a national security risk, but the government never gave a reason. Also, really quickly, just a technical note. It does still seem like I'm like breaking at the top. I don't know if you're listening to us on YouTube in the chat. Can you let us know what it sounds like? Maybe it could just be my headphones. I don't know. But and so like it is so crazy that you have the government. That we have a situation where we can have the government saying somebody is. Adam says the audio is good on YouTube, so maybe it's just me. I don't know. But we have a situation where the government is saying that somebody is a national security risk without giving any. There's no justification for it, right? And I thought that the small government people didn't like trusting the government. We weren't supposed to trust the government, but here the government is mandating that we trust them. Rumesa Ozturk, however, this is good, but her initial deportation is not, or her initial detainment didn't help anybody. But Rumesa Ozturk, the Tufts University student who wrote an op-ed critical of Israel, has been released from custody by a judge after the government refused to explain how she is a security threat beyond writing an op-ed critical of Israel, which is apparently illegal in this country. And Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a union apprentice, is still in the El Salvadoran gulag, despite the Supreme Court ordering the executive branch to facilitate his return. How does any of this help Americans and American workers? The answer is that it doesn't. It's bad, it's inhumane, and it doesn't help you. Another person says it's not on YouTube, so it's probably just me as far as the audio issues. I think we should have a couple of guests in the Zoom. We have on the line now, really excited to welcome to the Valley Labor Report for the first time. I don't know how it took us so long to get them on the show, but the National Treasury Employees Union's National President, Doreen Greenwald, and NTEU chapter president at the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Kat Farman. Greenwald, Farman, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thanks for having us.
We really appreciate it. And I know that y'all are incredibly busy with all of the work that's going on. So we want to talk to you about some of that. And so, Farman, I want to start with you. And can you explain to us what the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is?
Yes, thanks for having us. So the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, we are the federal government agency that regulates the biggest banks in the country. And we are an agency that works for you, not the banks and not for the CEOs. The CFPB, we protect working people from predatory practices from financial companies like predatory mortgages, loans. We regulate student loans. We regulate credit card companies. And we are here to protect the American worker from getting scammed by greedy Wall Street CEOs. We are the company that when Wells Fargo was ripping people off, creating fraudulent bank accounts and charging imaginary fake fees and charges to their customers in order to up their sales numbers, we were the agency that made them pay you back to the tune of billions of dollars, right? That they stole from working people who are their customers, and that we made them pay back to those people. And something that we have tried to implement but have been stymied under the current Trump administration that would also help the average person massively is we had put a rule that was supposed to go into effect in March to remove medical debt, cancel medical debt from Americans' credit reports. So that would mean that the pressures on people to pay off impossible amounts of medical debt through no fault of their own, right? Through these threats from debt collectors and health insurance companies would no longer exist because they wouldn't have that threat of ruining your credit score so that you can't get out a loan, you can't get a mortgage, you can't buy a home, you can't get a car. So that was set to go into place in March, and that has been challenged under the current administration and by the Republican Party in Congress. They're trying to undo that rule. Really, there's only one explanation, which is that they work for the CEOs, for the health insurance companies, for the greedy billionaires who want to continue to exploit you and me, and they want to put a stop to anything that would at all protect the average working person from being exploited. So that is what the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau work is, and under this administration, that's the kind of thing that is being stymied and pretty much put to a stop, and will be permanently damaged, stopped, repealed, undone, shut down if the Trump administration gets its way and they're able to lay off our workforce, which is what they've been trying to do since February. And our union has so far successfully held them off from being able to accomplish.
Well, Kat, I don't know about you, but that all sounds like woke and weaponized nonsense. And I'm really glad that we have somebody that's really thinking about the lenders today. I mean, it's really important that we have somebody making sure that they, that the billionaires get the money from the people who chose to get cancer. We really need to make sure that these folks are treated fairly. Obviously, I'm being facetious, and I also just want to mention that Kat is not speaking on behalf of the CFPB. She is speaking in her personal capacity and as a member of the National Treasury Employees Union. But I really think that gets to, the valuable work that the CFPB does, and how, and also just a couple of other numbers that Rohit Chopra has talked about. The agency has been able to deliver $20 billion back to the American people from fraudsters. And that obviously doesn't even take into account the amount of money that Americans saved by the fraudsters being put on watch, that there's a cop walking around on the beat, right? I mean, do you have any idea, like, what is the scale that we're talking about on, how much people were saved by not being defrauded in the first place because they knew that the CFPB was out there? Has there been any research done on that?
We certainly know that, like you said, the $21 billion that have been returned to Americans that was otherwise just would have been stolen, right, from these companies. That's what we've been able to provide just in the short time we've been operating. And we also return more than we spend. So for every dollar that we spend on this work that we do, almost $3 is paid back to American consumers. So there's a huge return for the investment of putting this work, making it happen, and having oversight over these companies. And talking about the scale, so when I talked about the medical debt rule that's been stymied so far, there's that right there is $50 billion that is on Americans' credit reports. That's medical debt. Right now, that would go away, would no longer be on people's medical, on their credit report, on your credit score. It would no longer be a pressure, a barrier to you getting fair access to mortgages, auto loans, student loans, these things that you need in our economy. You need them in order to be able to survive, right? You cannot be a working person in America and really not have credit in this economy. You kind of rely on it. We have a consumer-based economy, right. and the American people have to buy into that. For the most part, you have to play the game to be able to sort of work and have access to the things you need to have a job and support your family in this economy. And so people really can't opt out of this system, right? When that's the case, the fact that these companies do want to rip you off, they do want to exploit you, they do want to be able to get as much from you, and the pressures on their own workforce we've heard about from their own workers. So actually, there's Wells Fargo Workers United is the union that's organized Wells Fargo employees at multiple locations. And they have put out a report in April talking about how the same sales tactics, the high pressure sales tactics that were used that caused the previous instances not that long ago that ripped off customers are back in place now. And only in the last few months of this current Trump administration basically having us not doing any oversight, they've already begun to see that pressure, those high pressure sales tactics return, and see exploitative practices that hurt consumers and customers are already back in full swing. And they've been sounding alarm about that. And they actually have some insight into that too, because of the consumer complaint database, which is one piece of the CFPB that is currently actually still functional and operating, thanks again to our union's efforts suing to maintain the CFPB's functionality. That has been able to come back online, even though it was initially shut down, so that the Wells Fargo Workers United actually saw and published in their report the number of consumer complaints against Wells Fargo this year alone has already gone up compared to previous year. And so that is the kind of transparency that we provide into what's going on. And that's also the kind of accountability, like you said, these poor, greedy companies and billionaires, like, oh my gosh, looking out, who's looking out for them? Well, if they would like to have their, themselves represented in a fair way, they can do a good job responding to these complaints, and that will actually get published on the consumer complaint database that we make open data publicly available to anybody who wants to see it online. And if they were able to be responsive and actually invested in good customer service, if they resolved issues, they would see complaints would go down for their companies, right? They wouldn't have, relative to their market share, their size, or their customer base, they wouldn't have a high number of complaints compared to maybe other companies who don't invest in those good practices that support their customers and that provide reasonable responses and that actually try to fix issues instead of trying to exploit them to make money. So we do make a fair, transparent chance for them to have a say and show, okay, are you doing a good job? Are you actually providing good services for people who rely or have to use your services? They have to choose somebody to get a credit card or a bank account. And if you're not, that also shows up there. So they do have that opportunity. And that's one of the functionalities that is currently still being preserved that, we're sort of sounding the alarm about too. That's at risk. Even that bit of insight into what's going on in these financial companies and with Americans who are using them, that could go away if we're not able to protect the agency from these attacks and attempts to shut us down.
And so speaking of those attacks, we've gone back and forth, I think, both at the CFPB and at several other agencies. Folks have been fired, folks have been rehired. Some folks have been placed on administrative leave, and some folks have been fired again. Some folks have been rehired again. I mean, can you briefly walk us through the timeline at the CFPB and explain where we're at right now?
So we're currently still employed. Thumbs up
good.
there.
We love to hear that.
So that's that's a start, right? That's like baseline. If we're going to have functional consumer protection, again, we need people who can carry out those functions. And so the fact that we're still employed is baseline minimum. Okay, there's people who can actually carry out this work. But what's happened is, as soon as we got the Trump appointees in, this happened in early February for us, they started meddling and trying to basically shut us down and fire people so that we couldn't have any consumer protection functions that were happening. And that included firing 200 workers in February. And then they had plans on Valentine's Day on February 14th to fire 1,000 more workers and lay us off. And those didn't happen only because the same day through the NTEU lawsuit that I keep referencing, we were able to get a temporary restraining order to pause any layoffs. And so what's happened, there's been a lot of back and forth that you've mentioned in the courts since then, various orders. It's at an appeals court stage now. I'm not a lawyer. I am actually a coder. I'm a web developer. That's what I came to CFPB to do. And I'm the union president now. But I've had to learn some of the legal, happenings and to be able to keep up with this. But basically where we're at now is that there's been additional layoff attempts that we've been able to stop through temporary pauses by federal judges who have seen that the way this is being carried out is basically this this leadership, which includes the author of Project 2025, his name is Russ Vogt. Look this guy up. He's a proud radical Christian nationalist. And this is the guy who thinks that actually Trump should have more power to make the government be able to ignore Congress and the other branches in order to basically do whatever he wants. So that's Russ Vogt. He's tried to lay off again 1,500 out of our 1,700 workers just a few weeks ago, and we were able to put a stop to that. So that's when I received a termination notice that I was going to be laid off. And we would have lost access like the next day to all of our computer systems and, basically be waiting out the rest of our time until the layoffs went into effect. And that we also were able to stop. So it's been very, as you can imagine, disruptive. Somewhere in that time, we had about 3 weeks. Nobody was working because we were under stop work orders. And that meant that bank examiners, these are people who were hired as compliance officers, basically external to banks, would go in. They used to travel and go on site into the financial institutions, the big banks, to make sure, are they following the law? Are they actually doing the consumer protection law and requirements they're supposed to? And of course, when they're not, because they're not always, they were there to catch them and to get them to basically in real time make changes to follow the law. And if they didn't, that was able to be something that could end up in a lawsuit from our agency. So those folks, we have hundreds of people who that's their job. Their primary job is to go on site to the biggest banks and hold them accountable under consumer protection law and make sure that they're complying. Those people have been grounded. They haven't been able to do that. And then those 3 weeks when nobody was working, our consumer complaint database was also down. We had 75 Americans report imminent foreclosures in that time who were not able to get those complaints responded to. Those normally get escalated very quickly because people are about to lose their home. And so if they have a complaint, then we make sure that we get the bank, the mortgage lender, the institution to respond to it quickly and resolve it so that we can try to prevent home loss. That wasn't happening because we weren't being allowed to work. These are sort of the things that happened that we've undone. So some of those things are back on. The consumer complaints are back on. If someone has an imminent foreclosure today, they should get, a response. It will probably be slower because there's a backlog still from when we were shut down. And there's other things that haven't been turned back on. So our compliance examiners are still grounded. They're not going on site to any of these institutions. We're talking about hundreds of institutions that the CFPB oversees in this country. So we have hundreds of examiners who would theoretically be part of that oversight that are not doing that oversight. So we want everybody to know, if you're watching this or listening, that means that the biggest banks in the country right now are operating lawlessly with zero oversight. They are not having to follow consumer protection laws, or if they aren't, that's not necessarily known to the regulator, us, who would be there to make sure that's happening. So if they are starting to do more illegal practices, abusive practices, exploitative practices, preying on the American people, we don't have insight into that in real time the way that we're supposed to, that we're set up exactly to do.
Right. I also just want to share this bit from some information from ProPublica reporter Jake Pearson about some of the conflicts of interest of some of the Doge Bros who have been attacking the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Last month, a Department of Government Efficiency aide at the nation's consumer watchdog agency was told by ethics attorneys that he held stocks in companies that employees are forbidden from owning and was advised not to participate in any actions that could benefit from him personally. So this is not like, oh, I own stocks and I didn't know. He was warned about this. But days later, court records show Gavin Kliger, a 25-year-old software engineer who has been detailed to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau since early March, went ahead and participated in mass layoffs at the agency anyway, including the firings of the ethics lawyers who had warned him. Kleiger owns as much as $365,000 of shares in Apple, Tesla, and 2 cryptocurrencies, according to his public financial reports. Investments in those businesses are off limits to employees since the Bureau can regulate them. A further review now shows that he's invested in even more companies that are on the agency's prohibited holdings list. Kleiger also disclosed owning as much as $350,000 worth of stock in Google parent company Alphabet and Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway and the Chinese e-commerce company Alibaba. This means at a maximum, Kleiger could own as much as $715,000 of investments in 7 barred companies at 25 years old, which I'm sure he got from his really hard work. Experts said that a defanged and downsized consumer watchdog is unlikely to aggressively regulate those and other companies, freeing them of compliance costs and the risk associated with examinations and enforcement actions that in turn could boost their stock prices and benefit investors like Kleiger. Don Fox, a former general counsel of the independent federal agency that advises executive branch workers on their ethical obligations, said, quote, "This looks like a pretty clear-cut violation of the federal criminal conflict of interest statute. I don't see how it could be any other way. It is just astounding that this kind of stuff is happening in broad daylight." And I really appreciate, Kat talking to us about what's been happening and how that is going to affect working people. And Sister Greenwald, I want to bring you in to talk to us about how the union has been fighting back against this, and also, against attacks on your members at other agencies. How are you kind of fending some of this off? Sister Farman mentioned that she's still got a job, so that's great. So what are you doing to keep her and others employed?
So at the National Treasury Employees Union, we represent employees in 37 different federal agencies. And we're seeing varying attacks on all of those agencies by this administration. And, I have to give my hats off to my brothers and sisters at the CFPB, because they were the first out of the box to really get these kind of attacks driven at them. It was almost personal in nature. And they stood up and they've, stood strong against all of this because they care deeply and are passionate about the work they do for the American people. And they want to keep doing that work. And that is the common thread for all of our federal agencies, that federal employees take an oath to the Constitution. They want to serve the mission of each agency that they work for, and they want to serve the American people to the best of their abilities. And this administration and these attacks on federal workers is really causing chaos and anxiety. It is forcing people from the federal government, and it is really eliminating services that Americans depend on every day. And so from a union perspective, we're doing everything in our power to fight back against these attacks. And we would urge Congress to also join us in fighting back against these attacks. You just talked about conflicts of interest. Every American should be concerned about what this DOJ organization is doing. They are into data that they have no business being into. We're concerned about privacy attacks on that. What are they doing with that data? I just saw a recent report indicating that there may be up to 70% of conflicts of interest in the work that they're doing and the data they're accessing. And so as Americans, they take their private information seriously. They don't want people who don't have a need to know to have it. And so, to me, we need equal branches of government to stand up against some of these attacks and stand for federal workers. Americans voted for this administration because the administration said that they were going to come in and that they were going to make government work better for the American people. Instead, what we've seen is not an effort at efficiency, but an effort at chaos and dismantling the government as we know it. And the people who are being harmed by that are average Americans who depend on the resources of the federal government. And so as a union, we are fighting very hard for our federal workers to make sure that they retain their rights in the contracts that we have legally negotiated on their behalf, and using the courts to uphold those rights every chance we can.
You referenced Congress, and I want to bring that into this picture because Congress has, particularly over the last week or two, been putting forward proposals that would materially degrade the working conditions of all federal employees even further, even beyond, the layoffs and the degradations of, and the return to office and the degradations of like the ability to perform the work, that Kat has been talking about. But what are some of the, but we're talking about budget stuff that's going in the budget, like how the federal workers are going to be paid, what their benefits are going to be like. What are some of these attacks that the Republicans are proposing?
Well, so we're seeing across the board attacks, whether it be pay cuts to proposed salaries, to changes in retirement systems, to changes in how retirement is calculated, changes in general insurance. I mean, all of these things add up to giant pay cuts for federal workers. And let's be clear, I understand that Americans want their tax dollars used efficiently and effectively. So do federal employees. They're happy to point out any areas that there could be savings found. And what they expected their government to do was go in and do an analysis of the work that's performed and then make cuts where it makes sense using a scalpel, not a chainsaw as we've seen on television. What they're trying to do, though, is at the cost of the federal government in dismantling it, is arrive at large savings to fund tax cuts for the very wealthy. And what that means is services to average Americans who rely on it, like Meals on Wheels, cutting things like our national park services and the services that they provide and the protections they provide in our national parks. In food inspectors, people who make sure the food we eat and the water we drink are safe. Those are things that are being cut, and they're not being analyzed, they're just being cut. And so this is nothing about efficiency. This is about trying to achieve a bottom line to fund tax cuts that really are at the expense of average working Americans.
Right. Yeah, it's so gross, especially as, federal workers are, generally speaking, underpaid as it is. I'm sure that you can speak to this, but like when I was talking to, when I've lobbied on the Hill for my union, AFGE, before, and, the fact sheets that they give us at that time, I think the pay gap between federal employees and our private sector counterparts, like similarly situated private sector workers, was something like 27%. And I don't think that it's changed significantly in the intervening years. And so the idea that I'm going to further make it even worse to work here, especially as, we talked to some folks from NYOSH 3 or 4 weeks ago, and while we were on the call with them, an engineer texted one of them, who was the local union president, and said that he already has a job offer from the private sector for double the amount of pay that he was making at NYOSH, but he doesn't want to take it because he wants to work for NYOSH so that he can protect coal miners and workers in this country. He doesn't want to go work in the private sector for a corporation. He wants to serve the people. And I'm sure, I don't know, Kat, are there dynamics like that at the CFPB? Could you go and get a job like at a bank or something making significantly more than you make now?
Certainly, yes, that is absolutely. The revolving door is a real threat to average person's, ability to access services, because people don't stick around to provide those services if they can't count on the stability or wage growth that keeps up with inflation, right? And so they're going to be looking for greener pastures and find them in the private sector that, then they also have skills and knowledge from the regulation side that the private sector can exploit. And we've seen, people will go work for, this is not a recent phenomenon, this is not new, right? But it's accelerated under these kinds of circumstances. But you hear about people who go work as VPs for big banks. You hear about people who are hired by fintech companies, these online, lenders that you see on e-commerce sites, right? That are very exploitative, that have very high interest rates. and that people can get trapped in. And so people will go and work for these companies, these for-profit companies, even if they don't want to. I know that we've also had the flip, right? We've had people who were working in exploitative industries like private loans, debt collection, and then they come and work at CFPB in the public service side of it, and they're relieved to be able to finally use the skills that they have developed in the private sector for the public good, right? To be able to help like your fellow human being and provide a useful public service. And that I experienced that. I've had private sector jobs, where we're making software and websites to help big corporations like Unilever make money. And it didn't really feel satisfying to know that that's how my skills were being used on a daily basis. And you really feel that like pull towards something more meaningful. I believe all workers want and deserve to have work that's dignified, but also meaningful. To be able to, part of that dignified is being able to do work that is helping people and not damaging to society. And being able to do public service, public sector work is really appealing for that reason. And that's why you end up seeing people do take pay cuts or do want to stick around despite the ability to get paid more in the private sector. Because I think fundamentally humans want to feel we have pro-social tendencies towards helping each other. We want to feel like we're doing something useful for each other. And so people are able to come into public sector and stay doing that so long as they're compensated enough and the working conditions are fair. And so now you're seeing people getting pushed out with this chaos, destruction, these attacks on us and our work, and getting lured by private sector is an issue, but also I think just the chaos. Russ Vogt, who I mentioned earlier, Project 2025 author and my boss at CFPB right now, he said he wants to traumatize the federal workers. That's his goal. He wants us to feel terrible and traumatized and attacked every day that we have to get up and go to work in this environment until he can get rid of us. And I think that is affecting people. How could it not? I mean, these kinds of the destabilizing effects of what they're doing, people not knowing when am I going to get some layoff notice, even when we're winning like we are at CFPB Union, to keep our jobs for now, we don't know what the next attack could come after the next court decision, right? So we don't know how long it's going to last. So people feel that uncertainty and instability. And even if they really want to do public sector, public service work and are proud of the work we've done, not everyone can handle that. Not everyone should have to. So they have to leave. And that's the goal too, is forcing people out.
Right. Some of the, specifically some of the things that were really, I can't remember what it was specifically, but there was a way that you could get around one of these cuts if you volunteered to be an at-will employee. I think that was the pension or something. You could like, the Republicans are wanting to impose higher pension contributions from the employee, but you don't have to do that if you become an at-will employee. In addition to the wage cuts and the healthcare cuts that they're proposing, it's all really, really bad. It's going to make working for the federal government worse. And so, Doreen Greenwald, how are the National Treasury Employees Union and other federal unions fighting back against these proposals to degrade wages, benefits, and working conditions?
So first, we're working together to get the facts out, because a lot of these proposals are based on just false information. I mean, we've seen over the last 50 years, the federal government, as opposed to the population, has actually decreased. And where people, they're walking around and saying the federal government is bloated. Not true. It's actually decreased. Federal employees are paid on average 25% less than the private sector. So it's not as if they're coming to the federal government to get rich. They're coming to the federal government because they have unique skills and knowledge, and they're there to serve the American public. They take that very seriously. They're very policy oriented and driven. And so this chaos that they're creating is really to push people out, and it's going to affect the government going forward, because who's going to want to come work for the federal government when they're treated in such a way? The same with overall, the federal workforce is about 4% of the entire budget. So while they focus, like if we take all these cuts and do all these things, the American people are going to get all this money back. That's just not true. So there's a lot of false information out there, and it impacts our communities. 85% of the federal workforce works outside of DC. So many people think, oh, these are just trims to the Washington, D.C. budget. It's not going to impact me. But we're already seeing Social Security offices, IRS offices closing in local communities, people being laid off in their communities. The federal workforce is an incredible filter and feeds a lot of these small communities and gives them services that they would not have access to. So when you shut down parts of the federal government, you're impacting research being done in universities across the country. You're impacting the ability to care for our American people through Health and Human Services and some of the science that's going on there. The national parks, as I've said, affect the entire country. So while Americans support having a government that works effectively and efficiently, they want that done in a way that is respectful and pays attention to the services that they rely on. And so I will tell you, it is when somebody interacts with a federal employee, the numbers are outrageously high that they support and believe in the work that federal employees do. And so the whole point of this false information is to vilify them so they can take these actions and make them appear as if they're not human beings. These are good people who come to work every day. I have watched people walked out of buildings for no cause, not for conduct, not for performance, and fired for no reason, just to make a public spectacle of them, and only for us to fight to have them come back. And when Americans see that's happening to their neighbors, their friends, people they go to church with, they're outraged. And we're seeing that in town halls, that they want Congress to stand up to this administration, that they want a balance on power to make sure that the work that the federal government does continues to happen on their behalf. And these cuts are solely done to fund these ill thought through tax cuts.
Right. We had a chatter. Palace Real said, some people just want to do a job they are proud of. They aren't always looking to make the most money possible. Adam S. says, our job for our government is a job with meaning. And I really agree with both of those things. National Treasury Employees Union, National President Doreen Greenwald, and NTEU Chapter President at the CFPB, Kat Farman, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else that you want that you want to make sure that you leave our audience with before we let you go?
I would just give a shout out as well to federal employees. Nearly 30% of federal employees are veterans who have served this country in the armed forces and continue their service as federal employees. And they too are getting treated in this same way. And they deserve so much more from this country. We need to all stand up together and fight back against these attacks, because we want a country that works effectively and efficiently for the American people. And these plans damage that going forward. So if we all work together, we can come out of this better by working together and shining a light on these damaging effects and doing what's right for the American people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would add to following the money, right? We know that Elon Musk is the richest man on the planet, and he's spearheading these attacks on our public services and our public goods. What's in it for him, right? What's in it for the billionaire class, the wealthy class, the health insurance CEOs, Wall Street companies? What do they get and gain from attacking, defunding, and ending public services that serve working Americans? They get an opportunity. They get a cash grab. They get a privatization opportunity, and paying attention to who's doing this, who benefits, and what they would like to replace our public services with, instead of improving them, instead of getting more Americans to have a say and a democratic participation in making these services work better for us. What are they actually trying to do and get rid of, and what are they going to replace it with, right? They're going to privatize. They're going to look for ways they can put in middlemen to make more money off of us. And when you put it that way and you really see that is their goal, I think that's when you realize, like, there's no one who's going to stop them on their side if they have money to gain. That's really their goal. And so we have to be the ones who stand up and say, actually, we deserve better, and we don't want to give all this away to you. You don't own us. You don't own these services. You don't own our government. You don't own our democracy. But it is going to have to be us, the working Americans, who are willing to do that.
NTEU National President Doreen Greenwald, NTEU Chapter President Kat Farman, thank you both so much for your time. I appreciate it. All right. We got a bunch left to talk about. If folks have anything that they would like to say, you can give us a call at 844-899-TVLR. That phone number is 844-899-8857. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Let's talk about the layoffs at UPS. This was announced at an earnings call. UPS said that they were going to be laying off 20,000 people in response to anticipated lower demand from Amazon due to the tariffs. So this is obviously very big news and very concerning for the Teamsters at UPS. Obviously, Roswell Hub is a YouTube channel run by a UPS Teamster in Atlanta. As well as and he gets help from another UPS Teamster in Boston, that is David Allen and Greg Kerwood. They put out a video last week about the layoffs where they kind of gave their reaction to the news, and I thought there was some good stuff that they had to say about it. You know, a big part of the thing that they wanted to convey to people was, you know, don't panic, right? You know, I mean, this isn't happening yet. When it happens, we'll see how it happens, and we'll see how we can respond. But I pulled a little bit from their video, and I wanted to share it with the audience. Here is David and Greg on the Roswell Hub talking about these layoffs.
Now, Greg, when we talk about the 20,000 layoffs, that doesn't mean 20,000. They're not all union jobs, correct?
That's correct. In fact, I would guess that probably a vast majority of them are going to be management jobs. But again, we don't know until we know. Again, the closures and all of that consolidation and closures and automation, all those things have been part of a long-term plan with UPS. It's not news. Again, it sucks for those whose lives are upended. I'm not, ever going to pretend or forget that is, what's going on for some people. But, you have to keep in mind the company is messaging here, right? They don't just walk out and say, hey, guess what, folks, we're doing this, right? They're sending a message to their shareholders. And then the other side of this, believe it or not, our contract is only 3 years away, right? Scared employees are not employees that fight for better working conditions, right? So it's in the company's best interest, and they've done this many times in the past, to plead poverty, to cut jobs, to make people feel like their jobs are in jeopardy or they're in a panic. So when it comes time to negotiate and fight for better conditions and higher wages and things like that, people just, go, oh, I'm just happy to have a job. And they don't want to fight for anything, right? And so that's another perspective on this, right? The company got their clock clean in the last contract, and I'm sure they don't want to go through that again. And part of that was because, they were doing incredibly well and no one could debate that. And so their MO in general over history has been to be making lots of money and then sort of dial it back right before contract time so they can claim poverty and they need this and they need that. So that's another side of things to keep in mind.
The Teamsters also put out a statement. Teamsters General President Sean O'Brien is quoted as saying, United Parcel Service, UPS, is contractually obligated to create 30,000 Teamsters jobs under our current National Master Agreement. If UPS wants to continue to downsize corporate management, the Teamsters won't stand in its way, but if the company intends to violate our contract or makes any attempt to go after hard-fought, good-paying Teamsters jobs, UPS will be in for one hell of a fight. And so, I'm interested in seeing how the union responds to this when it starts coming down. Interestingly, I do remember almost immediately after the contract went through, UPS announced like 5 or 10,000 layoffs or something. I don't know how many people remember this, but it was pretty quick. And, you know, I have a regular spot, a guest spot I call in once a week on a conservative radio program, and they were like, "Oh, well, you know, look at this. Doesn't this mean that the union, the new contract is bad and the union overplayed its hand or whatever?" And, you know, I had to tell them, I was like, those are management jobs, buddy. Those are not, you know, those were not union jobs. Those were management jobs that UPS cut immediately after the contract. And so, you know, so we'll see what happens. You know, Greg Kerwood's cautioning there on two fronts. On the one, that the company did not say that these were going to be union jobs. So these could be more management layoffs. And, you know, I'm sure that UPS, like so many other companies, has a lot of management that could be cut, frankly, right? So, you know, that wouldn't necessarily be such a bad thing. And then also the cautioning on the politics of this sort of thing, right? I think is really, really important to remember that not all business decisions are made because of the financial soundness or because that is going to be the best way to make the company perform the best, right? A lot of business decisions, like decisions in so many parts of life, are political, right? And so there could be a political aspect to this to try to, like Greg said, beat Teamsters down at UPS so that they feel less ready to fight when the next contract comes up. So good stuff from them, and a good statement from Sean O'Brien about how the Teamsters are going to fight if they come after Teamster jobs. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, we'll keep an eye on it, but really not much else to say about it right now until things start coming down the pike. But obviously wishing our Teamsters in the audience the best of luck in fighting this. The number is 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. If anybody would like to call in and talk to us about how folks on the ground are reacting to this, I'd be interested in hearing how drivers and folks in the warehouse are reacting to this news on the Teamster side. We've got another clip that I wanted to share with folks, and this one is really, really frustrating here. This comes from Abigail Spanberger in Virginia. Abigail Spanberger in Virginia. She's a Congress critter right now, a Democrat running for governor, running for the Democratic nomination. I don't think she's won the Democratic nomination yet. And she was asked about whether or not she would support repealing Virginia's right-to-work statute. Abigail Spanberger has been endorsed by several unions already. A lot of union endorsements came between like 3 and 6 weeks ago. And so, given all of her union endorsements, you may be surprised at her answer to this question. Let's play the clip.
The Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Sears, your opponent in this race, has attacked you on the issue of right to work, which for our viewers is Virginia's law that allows anybody to work without having to pay union dues. She cites your support for the PRO Act, which you co-sponsored in Congress. Would you sign a bill as governor of Virginia to repeal Virginia's...
He said the way that he framed right to work is so frustrating. Because in a sense it's like technically true, but it misses the important thing of it. What he described right to work as being it protects workers from being forced to pay union dues. You don't have to pay union dues if you work in Virginia. And well, the reality is that you don't have to pay union dues in any state in the country, because as far as I'm aware, in every state in the country, there are jobs that are non-union, where the workers there have not elected to unionize. And in fact, in every state in the country, that is actually a majority of jobs. So you could always, in any state in these United States of America, you can always get a non-union job, and you won't be forced to pay union dues. If you want a union job, then in some states, the government stays away from the private contract negotiations between the union and the employer and says, y'all can agree to, kind of whatever contract provisions you want. However, in quote unquote right to work states, the government gets in the middle of these contract negotiations and says that the private employer, the company, and the union, the workers, are not allowed to agree to a provision called a union security clause, which says if you are going to work here, you have to pay at minimum an agency fee, a representation fee to the union, because the union represents you. And the union is legally obligated to represent you at that company. And so you have to pay, in a certain sense, for services rendered. And that is not a policy of the government. Unions don't have to bargain for that. Workers, rank and file workers, do not have to have their negotiating committee negotiate for that in non-right to work states. It's all totally free of coercion in the sense that libertarians think of coercion, right? Nobody is forcing anybody the companies are not forced to agree to these union security clauses. The union is not forced to bargain for them, but they can in non-right to work states. And so, what right to work is the government coming in and telling a private company what they can and cannot agree to, which is something that I thought that conservatives and Republicans and business types were against. But the reality is that they love that stuff when the government is coming in and prohibiting an employer from agreeing to good pro-worker protections and stuff like that, right? So they love force when it helps the company, when it hurts organized worker power, and they hate it when it helps workers, right? That's actually the dynamics here. Okay, so let's listen to this.
The Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Sears, your opponent in this race, has attacked you on the issue of right to work, which for our viewers is Virginia's law that allows anybody to work without having to pay union dues. She cites your support for the PRO Act, which you co-sponsored in Congress. Would you sign a bill as governor of Virginia to repeal Virginia's current right to work law?
Well, I think notably it's important that this last General Assembly, no one even submitted a bill that would repeal the right to work. I support labor, I support our strong Virginia economy, but no, I don't support a full repeal of our current right to work statute. Certainly it's an old statute. We've seen reforms and adjustments to it over the years, and recognizing that as Virginia and our economy moves forward, reforms may be necessary into the future, but no, not a full repeal.
Not a full repeal. This comes despite the fact that she has endorsements from the Baltimore, D.C. Metro Building Trades Council, that's the building trades unions, the SEIU Virginia State Council, the Teamsters Joint Council 83, Unite Here Local 23 and 25, the Virginia Education Association. But those endorsements all came before that. And I think that this would be surprising to a lot of people, to a lot of unions, because Abigail Spanberger in Congress was a co-sponsor of the PRO Act. And for those of you who do not recall, the PRO Act, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, only one of the things that it did, if it had passed, would have been to repeal all right to work laws in all 27 states that have enacted them. It wouldn't have just repealed Virginia's right to work law. It would have repealed all right to work laws. In addition to that, it would have done a number of things to tip the scales further towards unions and working people and away from bosses. But here, Abigail Spanberger says that despite the fact that I endorse the PRO Act, which goes far and beyond far, far beyond just simply repealing right to work. She says, if I was governor, not only, and the question, I just want to reiterate, the question was not, would you make repealing right to work the number one priority of your administration? That's even something that, I can, like, whatever. That's not your number one priority. Maybe that's okay. Maybe it's not. But that wasn't even the question. The question was, if the legislature sends a repeal of right to work to your desk, will you sign it? And she said no. That is bonkers. That is Looney Tunes. And so you are left with no choice but to question her support of the PRO Act. If the PRO Act had a snowball's chance in hell of passing, would she have voted for it, or would she have voted against it? Did she only support the PRO Act so that she could get union endorsements and union PAC dollars and union volunteers to canvass during her elections? Did she do all of that for those things, knowing full well that there was no scenario in which the PRO Act would pass, last Congress or this Congress? And then you are left with no choice but to ask the same question for all of the other co-sponsors of the PRO Act. The majority of Democrats in the House and the Senate are co-sponsors of the PRO Act. How many of them would back off if there was even a tiny chance of it passing? Because, like Spanberger said, a repeal of right to work was not even pushed through the legislature in Virginia last year. And so, it's not even super clear that a repeal of right to work would ever come to her desk. It is so gross that you have people like this that are taking advantage of union endorsements, union donations, union volunteers, and not doing the bare minimum to support. I don't know. I don't understand it. It's so gross. I don't know if you had anything else on that.
Well, I think it just speaks to some of the conversations you have to have when we endorse these candidates. That's a constant churn of controversy that we hear from union members about endorsements, right? You hear it from all political sides, right? Because folks on, who are more conservative are upset that unions tend to endorse Democrats more often. But you also have a lot of left-leaning people and left-wing people who are, just as sick and tired of the, loyalty to the Democratic Party that unions often show. And what do we get in exchange for it? Right. And I think that's really the conundrum there is, we recognize in most elections it's going to be a choice between your lesser of two evils, right? And that's just typically how it's going to be in this system right now. But, if you're going to sign your name on to a candidate, if you're going to give them money, if you're going to provide them volunteers, if you're going to give them your stamp of approval, you need to really make sure that they're really for you. That's going to be something they're going to have to navigate in Virginia, because that is a concerning sign. Like you said, it's one thing to put your name as a sponsor on a bill that is never going to actually make it to the floor. That's one thing, right? But when things are like actually happening, where are you going to be? Where are you going to line up? So yeah, that's a big concern. If something is put on your desk and you won't sign it, right? Not even will you go advocate for it, but will you sign it if it shows up on your desk, right? That's a big problem. But my understanding is this lady, her background is not what you'd call a working class background. It was a CIA background. And, I think that's also another aspect to this, is we got to look at who these candidates are and where they come from. Many, and we mentioned this early in the morning when we were talking to Brother Joe Cleveland, the vast majority of political candidates, especially the higher up in office you go, they are not working class. All right. They don't have to sell their labor for a living. They don't know many, hard days work. Or if they've worked, it's typically been in a position of management, position of ownership, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think, it's tough. It's tough because I get it. Unions are put in, tough situations, right? Where you are having to choose the lesser of evils and that kind of thing. You're trying to find ways to have influence and have an impact on the system. But yeah, I would just encourage unions, and not just specifically on this case, but like in general. I think all of us in labor, we need to have some real conversations about elections, endorsements, what our involvement can be and should be, what kind of resources we're expending on these elections, and whether we're getting our money back. When the average member joins the union, they join the union knowing that, yeah, I'll have to pay dues every paycheck, but I will get that money back. Like, I will get a return on an investment, right? To speak in just capitalist terms, right? The average union member gets a significant return on investment from their dues dollars. And I do have to wonder, you look at some of the elections that labor has been involved in over the years, what's our return on investment? Would we have been better off just saving that money and spending it on something else, right? There's a really, really significant need for new organizing in this country. Over 95% of private industry is non-union. That's a hell of a lot of targets. That's a lot of workers who could use a union. And so we do spend a lot of time and energy on politics, and it makes sense because these actions by these politicians have a real impact on our livelihoods, right? We've talked about it all day today. Budget cuts, policy changes, appointments to positions. They all impact our livelihoods, our working conditions, our family and communities. So it's not that we should just disengage. I don't want to suggest that, but I think we have to have some real tough conversations about what our engagement looks like and is it effective. And I think you're right that we do need to interrogate a little deeper when it comes to like some of these PRO-ACT sponsors. Again, it's great to sign on to a bill symbolically to show your support, but that's not the same as being there when push comes to shove. So, I think that's the kind of conversations we've got to have in labor, and I hope that rank and file members are taking that to their leadership and to their meetings and asking questions about these endorsements and about political engagement. And I hope leaders are listening to that as well, and really, really considering all the factors. And are we expending our resources in the best way possible, given the situation that we're in?
Yeah. In 2006, Spanberger joined the Central Intelligence Agency as an operations officer. She gathered intelligence about nuclear proliferation and terrorism. In 2014, she left the CIA and entered the private sector. 2006, not a good time to join the CIA. Like, that is not the political instincts that I would want in a governor. Like somebody under George Bush, as we are prosecuting forever wars in the Middle East,
torturing
people. Somebody who wants to join the CIA at that time is very morally suspect, I think.
I'm not saying she loves torture. I'm not saying that she does, but one could question, the motivations of joining at that time. That's right. That's fair. That's fair.
We do have a caller on the line. This caller from a 256 area code. Let's bring them on the air. Caller from a 256 area code. What's your name and where are you calling from?
This is former press secretary Dwayne. Hello, Jacob. Hello, Adam.
Hey, Dwayne. Good to hear from you. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to reiterate, especially since I've listened to a lot of what you're talking about, and even your guests that ran for office. I wanted to speak about almost everything you're talking about. SB 231, okay? with both of your callers and what you were saying about doing something about it. I can't reiterate it, and I'm not an attorney.
Dwayne, I'm sorry. Just a second. You're really, really, really sounding robot-y.
It's hard to
understand you. I don't know if you are
see if I can do something.
Yeah, I don't know if you're on speakerphone or if you're in a bad part of your house or something. But yeah, let's try to change something.
Is this any better?
Yes.
Maybe.
Is that any better?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I'll just stand right here then. I am out in the country, guys. I got mountains all the way around me. I have a 35-foot waterfall in the yard, and I'm where the signal doesn't come in. Okay, so here's what I was going to say. I can't reiterate enough that the decision in Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Commission gave the labor unions the exact freedom of speech rights as a person. Have you got me?
Right.
It did that for the businesses and the wealthy too. Now look, if that were taken to court against SB 231, it would do one of two things that would be beneficial. It would either reiterate your ability to not have things like that, contracts by the government telling you, which would be equal to a person that couldn't be told to do that. Have you got me?
Right.
It would either reiterate that or follow me here. If it didn't do that, it would prevent wealthy persons from giving donations that are against labor unions because it would have to decide. The Supreme Court would have to decide one way or the other. It couldn't have it both ways. Have you got me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm curious to know. How litigation is going to play out, because I know Alabama was not the only state to pass this kind of law. Tennessee did, Georgia did. I've heard there are folks looking into litigation on those bills. And yeah, I think you're right that it puts them in a bind, and so it's going to be interesting to see how that would play out.
Right, just like you at the meeting, and your guy that was wanting to run for office now because of only got to speak a little bit about the bill. That's how upset everyone is about this. Mm-hmm. It's an overreach and an overstep. And really, if you looked at the National Labor Relations actual rules, there's like a couple of them that it violates. And there's also, I can't remember the name of it, a case that's similar that took place in, I want to say, Kentucky, that set precedent that could be used. Again, I'm not an attorney, but you see the importance of this. This will stop what you were talking about with the governor that you were just referencing in video. This would stop what was happening in Alabama, and it would stop the oligarchy from being able to do what they did one way or the other. One of those two things would happen. You follow me? So I want to put that out there. I want anybody to look at it. Consideration for anyone upset about these things should go toward it going to court and getting it handled. It benefits you either way that it goes.
All right. Appreciate the call, Dwayne. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne.
Hey, thanks a lot.
All right. We got another caller on the line. Oh,
real quick, I was just going to say, I do hope that there are labor unions and allies who are exploring litigation on those bills, because I do think it poses a constitutional issue, to deny someone one of their legal paths to union recognition and to condition tax incentives on the company's behavior there. Like, if the company voluntarily recognizes the union, which is one of two legal pathways set up by federal law, they will strip the tax incentives from the company. So that puts the company obviously incentivized to fight the union. And what it really, to me, it sends a signal. It's the state government sending a signal to corporations: we do not want you to cooperate when your workers organize. We want you to stand firm and oppose that, and you will have backup from the state government. And it's a real shame.
Right. Yep. We got another caller on the line. This caller from a 404 area code. 404 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Stussy from Atlanta in the chat. I was going to reply on the IATSE talk from earlier with Trump rolling back, with him rolling back the
you said that.
Other things.
Yeah, I mentioned so.
You rolled it back the next.
Yeah, it's just so that folks understand what you're talking about. I had mentioned I think last week in Southern Labor that Trump announced tariffs on foreign films, and the IATSE and the Teamsters came out really strongly in support of that. And you mentioned in the chat that Trump has already rolled that back, and I didn't realize that. So yeah, explain, and just also for the viewers, Stussy is a IATSE member out of Atlanta. So yeah, what's going on there?
So if you notice, he announces his tariffs late at night, and then the tanks stock, and then he rolls them back. So his rich friends are making money. But with the IA thing, that was the same thing that happened, and Netflix and Disney and a lot of their stocks went down. But he has a Hollywood committee of Sylvester Stallone, Mel Gibson, and John Voight, and as our leaders call them, two bigots and a scab. Yeah. But John Voight actually had a pretty long, whatever you want to call it, and tariffs were only listed in certain circumstances, and so that's where Trump ran with it. But and to clear things up, the IA did not support it. The Teamsters did. They basically, IA released that they're pushing for a national film incentive, and that's what they're pushing to try and bring some work back. But Voight's plan had the incentives in it, and he had some other things, and only mentioned tariffs. And of course, that's the Trump's catchphrase. So if you say tariff, he's going to run with it.
Right.
And so that's where that went back. But he literally, not even a day, because John Voight's plan came out, and so it kind of backfired. Well, I won't say it backfired on Trump, because I'm sure his friends made a lot of money in the stocks.
Right.
In that short term. But I mean, if you look at most of the, unlike the country ones, but when it's business specific, he announces it late at night, the stocks open down, and then he rolls them back, backtracks from that. So if you got money to spend when he announces a tariff, invest in those companies and then sell fast.
Yeah, he there's some folks noticed that particularly when he did the 90-day pause on the Liberation Day tariffs, he tweeted, "Now's a good time to buy," and I think it was the 120 minutes leading up to the announcement, there was a significant bump in stock trading activity. So yeah, I mean, there's very clearly people that's kind of gaming the market here. And also, Stussy, appreciate your correction on IATSE's statement. I kind of skimmed it, and there was a couple of words that stood out to me, and so I thought they were taking a similar stance to the Teamsters, but it's a little bit more nuanced than that. And so here's some of what they said. IATSE continues to pursue all policy measures that can be implemented to return and maintain U.S. film and television jobs while not disadvantaging our Canadian members. Federal policymakers must act to level the playing field and make the U.S. film and television industry more competitive on the global stage. IATSE is engaging with the Trump administration and Congress to advocate for policies that result in those stated goals. President Trump has correctly recognized that the American film and television industry faces an urgent threat from international competition. Foreign governments have successfully lured film and television productions and the multitude of jobs they create away from the United States with aggressive tax incentives and subsidies. Films intended for initial release in the U.S. are increasingly being shot overseas, and American workers in our economy are paying the price. And Stussy, I want to ask you about that here in just a second. And then Matthew Loeb said the United States needs a balanced federal response to return film and television jobs. IATSE recommended that the Trump administration implement a federal film production tax incentive and other domestic tax provisions to level the playing field for American workers. And we await further information on the administration's proposed tariff plan, but we continue to stand firm in our conviction that any eventual tariff policy must do no harm to our Canadian members nor the industry overall. We seek reciprocal trade practices that ensure fair competition for all IATSE members. So yeah, definitely not like a full-throated endorsement like the Teamsters was. That was definitely a lot more kind of unequivocal. But yeah, so Stussy, if you have any other thoughts on that, I'd be interested in hearing about it, but also about the general state of the TV and film industry. I've heard that it's been like really, really rough.
Yeah. Well, first, you can't tariff a service, which is already a misnomer. The EU has a digital tax for these kind of things, and that's what would actually have to take place, not a tariff. And because this plan wasn't a plan, you've got movies that are partially shot here and partially shot elsewhere and out of the country. And, how is that? Or if it's shot somewhere and post-production is done somewhere, is it a split tariff? How do they do that? Is it on the budget of the movie or what it makes? So there was so many unanswered questions on how that would work, which is why nobody believed it was ever going to stick. But yes, the TV and film is down. I think the last I heard it was about 45%. But it's down globally, and everybody likes to point fingers that it's all gone overseas. But if that was the case, then the shows that were supposed to be shot here, that number would go up, and it hasn't. It's just down everywhere. Which is why the national film incentive is proposed. The only people that actually pay attention and know, the only way we can compete financially with any other country in the world is universal health care. That's our biggest cost of budgets, and it's every 3 years when we go into negotiation, that spends most of the time trying to keep what little bit of health care and pension we have left. So until that happens, incentives are about our only leverage that we have to compete against other countries outside of the U.S.
What do you make of the? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, and in Loeb's speech was about Canada, and so many IATSE members forget Canada is part of IATSE. So we can't fight against them, even though they have different, incentives and work contracts than we do, but they're still an IA, union.
Right. What do you make of, you mentioned that incentives are really kind of the only way that the U.S. film industry can kind of fight back against the lower cost of doing film overseas. What do you make of the kind of state-by-state film incentives? I've heard mixed things from folks about that. Some people saying, like Louisiana and Atlanta, that the incentives actually cost more for the taxpayer than they generate, and so it's not really a good investment for the state. But also that for some people that's being an IATSE member working in on film and TV in Atlanta and Louisiana is like the best job that they've ever had, and that wouldn't exist without those incentives, those state specific incentives. What do you make of that dynamic?
Well, anywhere that cameras are rolling in the world, there's an incentive. That's just how it is. As far as that, it's so spread out now that Kentucky and Oklahoma and Utah, and the problem when people say, "Oh, it costs the state money," they're looking at a dollar-to-dollar return on that. But if you ask businesses and all the workers that live there, the economic impact outweighs the one-on-one. Anybody that lives and works in the state, we're paying taxes on everything. When a show is here, the gas, the food, the hotels, all the stages pay property taxes and utilities. So they're still getting money back. Is it going directly from the film incentive? In a lot of cases, no. But overall, you talk to any business owner where TV shows or movies go and film, when we're slow, they'll at their local business meetings, association meetings, will ask when it's coming back, because
right,
especially where I live, there's a lot of bars and restaurants. When we're not working, we can't afford to go out and drink and go to dinner, and they know that and they see it, and so the economic impact outweighs the return, a direct return on the incentive.
Right. All right. Well, Stussy from Atlanta, really appreciate you taking the time to call in.
And I enjoy listening to you guys every week, so keep up the good work.
Appreciate it, brother. Appreciate it. Fellow IATSE member. Love to hear. Lots of IATSE today. We had a local 900 president. We had a member from Georgia could just call in. That's great. It's going to be important that entertainment unions stick together, given some of the threats that we're facing with, the National Endowment for the Arts, humanities, PBS, all under threat. So I know IATSE has been working in coalition with other entertainment unions, SAG-AFTRA, NABIT, CWA, others. They've all been organizing together to try to come up with a response and figure out what to do, because you've got the tariff and film incentive situation going on, and the depletion of the film and TV industry that this brother described. And I appreciate that point he made, that like, hey, if it was going down in America because everyone's leaving to do it somewhere else, then we would see an increase in foreign productions, right? So if we're not seeing that, it's something going on deeper in the industry there. And I also appreciate that point he made about universal health care, because the United States is the only developed economy that does not provide some sort of universal health care coverage. It is a perennial issue in every union negotiation. It ultimately costs the employers a lot of money, which is why I think it's, pretty wild that so many in the business class are against Medicare for all and that kind of healthcare reform, because they stand to benefit as well. Like, from my vantage point, I mean, I'm not a big business owner, obviously, but I would think it would be easier if we had a national healthcare system and you just paid your taxes on it and you didn't have to worry about renegotiating it every 2 to 4 years. And you didn't have to worry about premiums and deductibles changing, and in-network versus out-of-network providers, and all the complications that come with this, right? We could just do like every other damn country that has the money to do it and have single-payer health care. And I think that would be a huge relief, especially for workers in the arts and entertainment industry, like IATSE members, like so many folks who work in a gig-based, work life, where it's seasonal, where you're going from show to show, production to production. It may last for a few months and then you go to something else, or you look for something else. A lot of folks in the arts and entertainment industries are working as gig workers, and therefore even less likely to have decent health coverage. So it would be a big boon for all Americans, all working people, but especially for people in the arts, in those kind of fields where healthcare can be hard to come by, or where you do get it, it's a very expensive priority, and something, the time and energy and the money you gain on healthcare negotiations could have been spent on retirement, wages, health, other forms of health and safety, all sorts of other things. And so, I appreciated that point as well.
Yeah, well, all that sounds good, but Palace Real in the chat reminds us that we need to give the military hundreds of billions of dollars and be the world police. So I don't know if we can afford that.
That's true. That's true.
We should have Connor Lewis in the Zoom now. Connor Lewis is president of the Seven Mountains AFL-CIO. He won the presidency of his labor council by campaigning on a promise of getting an 8th mountain This is in central Pennsylvania and center Mifflin, Huntingdon, and
we're going to hold him to
Juanita-
that.
Juanita counties. Yeah,
we take such promises very seriously on the Valley Labor Report. We hold our candidates accountable. So yeah,
where are we at on the 8th Mountain, Connor?
We're working on the project labor agreement for it.
Okay.
You know, we're insisting that it all be done with union labor. So we're just talking to the Building Trades Council, trying to get everything set up. But there's even talks about a 9th Mountain at this point. So we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. We're going to get a 9th Mountain in central Pennsylvania. So we're looking forward to that, and looking forward to it being the 8th and 9th Mountains being union built. So Connor, I got you on because you are you're a TikToker under the name Union Dad. Isn't that right? Union Dad on TikTok. And also a Catholic, and so you've been doing Pope talk recently, and you had some good videos about the new Pope, I thought. And as somebody who is not a Catholic but whose in-laws are Catholic, and I'm actually going to Mass for the first time in a long time tomorrow. Not partaking in the Eucharist, obviously, since I'm not Catholic. Anyway, so looking forward to that. But I've been hearing a lot about the Pope, and been hearing some good things and bad things about the Pope, and you've had some really good videos on TikTok about maybe what to expect from the new Pope, and kind of positioning his election as Pope in the kind of context of the Catholic Church. But like one of the things that is more concerning that is that Michael Knowles, for example, is really excited about this new Pope. Michael Knowles of Daily Wire fame, and Michael Knowles actually, before the Pope was elected, was asking his audience, what regnal name would you like for the Pope to take? I'm hoping for Leo the 14th. So I hear that, and that was a tweet before he was elected. And so I was like, oh wow, maybe this isn't good. But there's also reasons to think that maybe it's fine. Maybe it will be good. Maybe he'll be a good Pope. So I guess, what are the first things for non-Catholics or for Catholics that don't kind of follow the church super closely? What are some of the first things that you think is important for people to know about the new Pope, about the name Leo, and about the relevance of him coming after Pope Francis?
So I think one of the most important things for people to know up front is that it's hard to talk about, as much as it often happens, it's hard to talk about the Catholic Church in terms of kind of progressive versus conservative, because there are a lot of different things that map very differently in the Catholic Church. And even the progressive, quote unquote, progressive cardinals, bishops, et cetera, people like Francis, are not going to align neatly with, political progressives in the United States. Even though Francis was known for being more welcoming toward LGBTQ plus, Catholics and that kind of thing, there was still not a world where Francis was going to, fully endorse, the right of marriage for, same-sex couples or something like that. Like, that just wasn't going to happen. Right. And on the flip side, even though Benedict XVI was known rightly as a conservative pope, he had a lot of critiques of capitalism as well that would not map on to, the American political right. It does map a little bit onto American cardinals specifically, and American Catholics specifically, but we've always been a weird outlier in the Catholic Church. I wouldn't take that to mean anything about the church more generally, and American Catholics make up about 1.6% of global Catholics. So, as much as we love to be the main character, we're really not. Right. I keep thinking a lot of Americans, especially because the new Pope is an American, want to make it about America. And I keep thinking of like the Mad Men theme of the Don Draper, like, I don't even think about you kind of thing. Right. Like, that's kind of the Catholic Church toward the US, like, we're not the main character. We're not the biggest thing on their mind. But I think the way that I look at him is that he was a compromise candidate. All the things seem to indicate that he was a compromise candidate. And things do kind of hit the press about how the conclave went after the conclave, a little bit at least. And it sounds like he was kind of the really core pro-Francis crowd, allegedly, and this is all allegedly because, nothing is ever going to be quoted about this.
Right.
Allegedly didn't have the votes to get through one of their preferred candidates. One of the people that is like staunchly in the tradition of Francis and, is both in style as well as substance and everything. And so Prevost was their last ditch effort to get someone that was acceptable and generally within the vein of Francis, but that could get votes from enough of the cardinals to get through. And so I think it's really hard to say exactly what direction that he's going to go, but it's been weird because, you see a lot of liberal Catholics celebrating this. And you see a lot of really conservative Catholics celebrating this. And you even see, even some of the outright traditionalist Catholics that are not upset, at least not yet. So it's like, it's very interesting that everyone seems to kind of be reading some kind of hopeful expectations into him. And then, I think that there are a fair number of people that are very wait and see on it. So it's really interesting, he is a very difficult cardinal to actually kind of nail down. And it doesn't help that he picked a name that is one of the most consequential and very complicated popes since the Reformation. And so that just complicates it, and even because you can read so much into that pick.
Right. Yeah, tell me about Leo the 13th. Like, what are some of the complications? Because one of the reasons that Michael Knowles was so excited about the Leo the 14th is that he said, and I don't know, but he said that Leo the 13th was like super, super, super anti-communism and anti-socialism, and then in passing, Knowles kind of did admit he was also critical sort of capitalism, but he was much more hardline against communism, and so that's the thing that he was really known for. But then I hear people kind of on the other side, quote unquote, that say that Leo the 13th was the workers' pope, and he was known for Rero Novarum, which I haven't read, but is that they say that was kind of critical of both communism and capitalism, but they say was more critical of capitalism and put workers more at the center, and is kind of the father of Catholic social teaching. So how do you understand Leo the 13th's legacy, and also why should we take it for granted that Leo the 13th is who he would be calling back to rather than Leo the 12th or the 1st or the 3rd or whatever?
So there's been some reporting post-conclave that, and I can't remember the specific cardinal, but that a cardinal had breakfast with the new pope and asked him, why he picked that name. And he did acknowledge that it was Leo the 13th.
Okay.
I think the context of why Rerum Novarum was released, the term is promulgated, but was released, which is basically like a circular letter that goes to all of the Catholic hierarchy, at least at that time. Since the 1950s or so, it's been addressed to the faithful as well. And a really important shift is that now these days, most encyclicals that are addressing wider social issues are addressed to all people of goodwill, whether or not they're Catholic. The reason it came to be is because it was first released in 1891, and consider the kind of position that the Catholic Church was in. honest to God, a lot of the Catholic Church was still running scared of the French Revolution. They were running scared of the rise of kind of mass European democracy, of, the sweeping away kind of the old divine right model of rule. They didn't like it. They were terrified of it because they were getting swept away in a lot of respects along with, the divine right of European monarchs. And on top of that, just about 21 years prior, the Kingdom of Italy unified and took all of the papal states away from the Catholic Church. So because until 1870, the Catholic Church, or specifically the Pope, had directly ruled over a good chunk of like the middle of Italy. And they were reduced to just within the walls of the Vatican. And they still maintained that, that's our territory. And they were basically it was referred to as the captive papacy until the 1930s. And so they feel under threat by the world changing around them. You have the rise of industrial capitalism. Everything is changing incredibly rapidly. Marx said everything that's solid turns to air. That was the 19th century. And so Leo XIII was the first pope that kind of just took actually read the room and decided we need to be present in all of this. We need to figure out how we relate to all of this instead of sticking our heads in the sand. And the biggest issue at the time was, the urban working class and, the impact of industrial capitalism. And so I think it's wrong to paint him as anti-communist, partially because communism was not a significant political force in the 1890s yet. And it's more that he was trying to say that both of these are the wrong direction, and there's a third Catholic way to deal with, the modern world. And so it wasn't anti those so much as it was trying to set out like, this is the Catholic answer. And that's where a lot of Christian democratic parties in Europe eventually came from. Rerum Novarum, the thing that's important to understand about Rerum Novarum is it was generally pro-worker. But the biggest thing is that the bishops had no idea what to do with it. This wasn't what theology was about in their minds. Theology was about, talking about Marian devotion and, kind of more less earthly. They were talking about spiritual matters, not earthly matters. And so they had no idea what to do with it. And there was no additional anything written by the papacy on Catholic social teaching for another 40 years. And so everything that developed after it was really done from kind of the bottom up with a lot of clergy like John A. Ryan in the United States that were very interested in this, that were embedded in working class communities and were like, this is something we can work with. And it was still undefined enough that they kind of took it and just kind of did what they needed to do with it. And for a long time, they didn't get that much scrutiny from like the church, which normally, all theological writing goes through censors. And so I really think it's a misrepresentation to really portray him as either, on the left or the right, because his entire point was both of those are wrong. Here's the Catholic solution, because he was trying to put the Catholic Church back in the center of modern life and was in a lot of ways successful. And I think that's a good leeway to kind of bring us back to the present and help us understand in what ways Leo XIV is a compromise candidate between the Francis faction and the more maybe traditionalist faction. And one of the things that you said in one of your interviews that I thought was interesting is that a lot of the traditionalists, in your view, like so much of their concern with the direction that Francis was taking the church was about aesthetics. And so much of the traditionalist concern since Vatican II has been about aesthetics, actually, maybe even more so than Catholic social teaching or whatever. Explain to us like what the divides are within the church and maybe how this cardinal, now Pope Leo XIV, was able to kind of be the bridge between them. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the more traditionalist wing of the Catholic Church is super concerned with aesthetics. And that's not to be dismissive, because I think that there's a legitimate kind of tradition that they're kind of working in, because a lot of the Catholic response to the Reformation was about aesthetics. It was about like grand, like impressing the kind of weight and majesty of the church on everyone through, kind of the aesthetic awe and spectacle of, the mass, of churches, of artwork, everything. So, and Francis was very unconcerned with aesthetics in the same way. And in fact, if anything, he opted towards simplicity. And he came from like a Latin American tradition that viewed those kind of grand aesthetics as kind of creating a distance between them and the people. And so was very concerned with like dialing that down. And so that was honestly one of the biggest things that honestly triggered the traditionalist faction, is that he was so unconcerned and even opposed to kind of the big aesthetics that Benedict XVI was huge on. And there's every indication that Prevost is more, or, Leo XIV is much more sympathetic to a more traditional view. Like even the regalia that he came out with when he was announced as Pope, like instead of wearing like a simple white cassock like Francis did, he wore the same regalia that John Paul II and Benedict XVI did. So and there is at least some early indication that there might be, and this is again all reading tea leaves, it's only been a couple of days, but there is some early indication that there may be a little bit of relaxing on the use of the Latin Mass, which would be a huge thing for traditionalists, and doesn't necessarily get super into like the more ideological kind of social stuff. It does and it doesn't, but I think that him being more open to that point of view, where Francis took a very hard line, is probably a big part of what made him a more attractive candidate to the more conservative faction of the College of Cardinals. And I think that may have made him a more appealing candidate to a lot of people, because there's been a lot of, very nasty infighting at the highest levels in the Catholic Church over the past over a decade. And I would imagine that there are a lot of cardinals, even ones that are sympathetic to Pope Francis, that are just like, we need a break from this. Like it's been nasty. And I'm sure that they're like, look, a lot of things are changing. We just need to, bury the hatchet for a while and sort this out. So I think that honestly, like he was viewed as kind of a bridge builder, and probably in some important respects, a middle of the road candidate that could, keep the more conservative cardinals happy.
And just to the Latin Mass, can you explain what that argument is about between kind of the traditionalists and the non-traditionalists in the church, and maybe even why different people care so much about it? Because it seems like if I were Catholic, I would be like, okay, if some people want to do a Latin Mass, they can do that, and if other people want to do a Mass in their own language, which frankly seems like, which I don't know why people are so hung up on the Latin Mass, but like if people want to do it, I don't know why I would stop them as somebody who's wouldn't want to go to a Latin Mass. But yeah, what is even that argument about?
A lot of it goes back to the Second Vatican Council. And I will say that in a lot of different places, there has been Mass celebrated in, the local language for a long time, like in Coptic Catholicism or Eastern Rite Catholicism. So it's really just kind of like the main Mass of the Catholic Church that they're fighting over, because there have been regional variations for centuries and centuries. A lot of it really is that the Second Vatican Council took a look at the Tridentine Rite and viewed it as creating a distance from the clergy and the faithful in a way that was not healthy for the church. And if you go to it, I have been to, a Latin Mass twice, and They're correct. I mean, it does. Like, a lot of it is really creating visually and just in the celebration of it, like a big distance from the priest. Like the faithful are kind of passive observers to the mass rather than active participants in the mass.
Right.
And so that's kind of the core of it, and why, the reforms even happened. Where it gets tricky is that, a lot of more conservative-minded Catholics will say that it went too far, that, that the new mass is undignified, you have guitars and stuff that were basically becoming Protestants, like that kind of thing. Whereas you hear from more kind of like pro-Vatican II kind of Catholics that, no, like, we're meeting people where they're at. And it's important for us to do that. And, there's a really broad range and spectrum, because even like there is how mass is celebrated, you can do like a very kind of aesthetically conservative Vatican II, like New Rite Mass, or you can do one that is much more kind of like informal and has like guitars and a band or whatever the hell you want. Like there is a lot of flexibility, but that really is a lot of it, is that, and I mean, the mass is central to Catholicism. And so arguments over how the mass, I mean, there's a lot of weight invested in how do we do this, because this is the central part of the Catholic Church.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So as we're wrapping up then, I guess, what are your predictions for how this Pope will relate to, working people and labor? What should unions expect from this Pope?
I think that he's going to be labor friendly. I mean, that is kind of the official kind of position of the Catholic Church. And I think it's reasonable to think that he may pay more attention to those issues than most popes. One thing that I think is very important to keep an eye on, and that I'm very, very convinced that this is going to be a big part of his papacy, and that is very relevant to labor, is artificial intelligence. And one of the things that he said in some news reports, it was reported that he viewed the importance of Leo XIV because he views like the changes with AI and all these new things as comparable to the Industrial Revolution, that these are massive changes that are occurring in our society, and that we need to be present, as a church. His view is that we as the Catholic Church need to be present in these discussions. And so I really think that he is going to weigh in on AI, and I would imagine that what that's going to look like is very skeptical of AI, very hostile to AI insofar as it takes work from workers, and probably very focused on, human dignity and how AI may be a threat to human dignity. So I expect the Catholic Church under Leo XIV to come out very skeptical and even overtly hostile to AI, and a lot of it is going to be on labor grounds.
All right. Well, there we go. Connor Lewis, union member of the News Guild, and president of the Seven Mountains Labor Council in Pennsylvania. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
You can find him at Union Dad on TikTok. He's not even I don't think he has children. I don't know why I think that's like stolen valor or something. As a union dad, Adam, do you feel stolen valor from Connor?
I thought Connor had kids.
Does he have kids? I don't know. I didn't. Maybe he does.
I am a union dad, so yeah. But appreciate Connor and all he does. And it's interesting that we talk about the Catholic Church 2 weeks in a row. Last week we had the Catholic Labor Network on, and so it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. I know there's already been some discussion among some critics about this new Pope's role in the child abuse scandals, both here in the United States and in Peru, where he was located for some time. So, it's going to be interesting to see, especially as y'all described, where basically all sides seem to be expecting something, right? Not everyone's going to get everything they're looking for, clearly. So
yeah, who's going to lose out?
Right. So we'll find out for sure.
All right. Well, there we go. I think that wraps it up for me, Adam. What kind of plugs do we have?
Just want to remind folks, as always, go to Labor Notes, check out those trainings, labornotes.org/events. They have some good stuff coming up online and in person in New Orleans, May 31st. You Alabama folks, don't forget, May 20th, Alabama Arise will have a legislative wrap-up. 6 p.m. on Zoom. Go to alarise.org and you can find out more. You can register. The Alabama legislative session coming to a halt. Finally, thank the Lord. Always glad when they go home and can stop doing bad things. So tune in if you want to find out. And again, shout out to Huntsville, the Starbucks location at University Drive and Memorial Parkway. The workers there are organizing. They will have their election this week. So sending our love and solidarity to them. And again, thank you to Means TV for having us on the platform. Those of you who are listening who have not subscribed to Means TV, you should totally do that. It is a really cool worker co-op platform for entertainment. So you can find shows like ours and other, creators, quote unquote, but also lots of really solid documentaries and films and original content. And my favorite is Means Morning News, which comes out, 3 to 5 days a week or so. Really great rundown of the daily news. It's about 20 minutes. Sam Sachs does a great job there. So if you're not already on Means TV, do check that out. You can get a discount at 20% off if you use our code TVLR. So either subscribe for the whole year or at a monthly rate, however you want to do that. But do check it out. Really encourage that. It's important that, just like we do this show so that working people have media of our own, we need to have platforms of our own as well. I mean, that is, I think, becoming more and more real as we see the concentration of corporate power, both politically and just economically. And so, we don't need to be subject to platforms that are not owned by us. We're only on platforms that are not owned by us. That leaves us vulnerable. So really appreciate the partnership with Means TV there. And thanks again, everyone who has tuned in. There was a lot we didn't get to. So if you're not subscribed to our newsletter, do that, tvlr.fm. A lot of stuff that we didn't get to that we, we'll put in the newsletter. So that's another way to stay informed. And again, thank you everyone for your support. We can't do this without you. It's a grassroots operation. So appreciate everybody who tunes in, calls in, likes, comments, and of course donates.
Yep. One more reminder for the food drive. If you're listening to us live, go ahead and put some food out by your mailbox if your letter carrier hasn't come out. And I think that's it for us. So we'll see you next week, folks. Appreciate you tuning in.